When Lucy and DeMarco overheard the whispered threats coming from the next table at Bella Rosa, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, he knew exactly what kind of monster sat across from the terrified brunette crushing her napkin into shreds. He'd seen men like Nolan Pierce before, polished predators hiding behind expensive suits and charming smiles. But when Elena Vale's eyes met his for just a fraction of a second, swimming with desperate silent prayer, something ancient and protective roared to life inside Lucien's chest. He was about to dismantle a man's entire world. If you want to see how far love can pull someone from darkness, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Keats. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Bella Rosa like bullets against glass, each drop catching the glow of the chandeliers and scattering golden light across the restaurant's elegantly dressed patrons. Elena Vale sat perfectly still in her chair, spine rigid, hands folded in her lap beneath the white linen tablecloth where no one could see them trembling. She wore a navy dress Nolan had picked out that morning, modest neckline, sleeves to her elbows, nothing that would draw attention, nothing that would give him a reason. Across from her, Nolan Pierce cut into his ossobuco with surgical precision, each movement deliberate and controlled. He looked every inch the successful attorney. Sharp jawline, steel gray eyes, dark hair styled just enough to seem effortless. To anyone watching, they were simply another beautiful couple enjoying an expensive dinner. Anniversary, maybe. Reconciliation after a rough patch. No one could see the bruise flowering purple beneath the sleeve of Elena's dress where Nolan's fingers had dug in 3 nights ago. No one heard the threat he'd whispered in the car on the way here, his voice soft and pleasant while his hand rested on her thigh like a vice. Smile, Elena. His voice cut through her thoughts, pleasant as poisoned honey. She obeyed immediately, muscle memory overriding everything else. The smile felt like broken glass in her mouth. That's better. Nolan dabbed his napkin against his lips. You look so much prettier when you're not sulking. Elena's throat tightened. She reached for her wine glass just to have something to do with her hands, something to keep them from shaking visibly. The Barolo was excellent. She couldn't taste it. Everything had tasted like fear for so long now she'd forgotten what food was supposed to feel like. I've been thinking, Nolan continued, his tone conversational, the same voice he used in courtrooms to eviscerate opposing counsel. About your little friend. Jessica, is it? The one from your school. Elena's stomach dropped. What about her? She called you 4 times yesterday. He took a sip of wine, watching her over the rim of his glass. I checked. Of course he had. Nolan checked everything, her phone, her emails, the mileage on her car. He knew her schedule better than she did. He'd isolated her so gradually she hadn't noticed until the walls were already built. She was asking about lesson plans, Elena said quietly, for the 2nd graders. Nolan set down his glass. See, that's interesting, because when I listened to the voicemails, it sounded like she was asking if you were okay, like maybe you'd said something to her. About us. The last 2 words carried enough weight to crush bone. I didn't, Elena said quickly, too quickly. She knew better. Desperation made Nolan worse. I would never... Lower your voice. His smile never wavered. To the couple 3 tables over, he probably looked charming, attentive. We're in public, darling. Let's not make a scene. Elena's hands twisted the napkin in her lap until her knuckles went white. She wanted to scream. Wanted to stand up and tell every person in this restaurant exactly what kind of man sat across from her. But fear had roots that went deeper than logic. Fear lived in her nervous system now, automatic as breathing. When we get home tonight, Nolan said, cutting another piece of veal with meticulous care, we're going to have a conversation about boundaries, about loyalty. I think maybe you've forgotten how good you have it, Elena. How many women would kill to be in your position? The threat hung in the air between them, dressed up in pleasant words. I haven't forgotten, Elena whispered. Good. He reached across the table and took her hand, his grip just tight enough to hurt. Because I'd hate to have to remind you again. Last time you seemed so upset afterward. Last time she'd had finger-shaped bruises around her throat for a week. Last time she'd called in sick to school and spent 3 days unable to look at her own reflection. The waiter appeared with practiced timing, his smile professional. "How's everything this evening?" "Perfection," Nolan said warmly, releasing Elena's hand. "My compliments to the chef." "Wonderful to hear, Mr. Pierce. Can I interest you in dessert? Our pastry chef has prepared a spectacular tiramisu." "Just the check, thank you." Elena's chest constricted. The end of dinner meant the drive home, meant being alone with him, meant whatever punishment he'd been planning all evening, the anticipation of it sharpening his mood into something dangerous. She needed to use the bathroom, needed 60 seconds away from the weight of his attention, the suffocating presence of him across the table. But asking permission would only make things worse. Showing weakness fed something dark in Nolan, something that had grown hungrier over their 2 years together. "I need to," she started. "No." The word landed like a slap. "Nolan, please." "I said no." He smiled at her, all teeth. "You'll wait until we get home. I don't trust you wandering around right now. Not after that phone call situation." Humiliation burned through Elena's veins. She was 28 years old, a second-grade teacher with a master's degree in education, and she couldn't even use a restaurant bathroom without permission. This is what she had become. The waiter returned with the check. Nolan produced a black American Express card without looking at the total, handed it over with the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about money in his life. His family owned half of Chicago's legal landscape. His father was a judge. His connections ran deep. Elena had learned that the hard way when she'd tried to leave 6 months ago. The police officer who'd taken her statement had gone to law school with Nolan. The report had disappeared. Nolan had found out within hours, and the punishment had been... She couldn't think about that night. Not here, not now. "Ready, darling?" Nolan stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. He moved around the table and pulled out Elena's chair, his hand settling on the small of her back. To anyone watching, it looked protective, gentlemanly. His fingers dug in hard enough to make her gasp. "Remember," he murmured against her ear, his breath hot on her skin. "Not a sound in the car, not a word. When we get home, you're going straight to the bedroom, and then we'll discuss how disappointed I am." Terror lanced through her so sharp and sudden, she thought she might be sick right there on Bellarosa's imported Italian marble floors. Her vision swam. The chandeliers overhead became distant stars. This was her life now. This was all there was. And then, "Excuse me." The voice came from behind them, low and measured, carrying an edge of something Elena couldn't quite identify. Authority, maybe? Or danger wrapped in silk. Nolan's hand stilled on her back. They both turned. The man standing 3 feet away looked like violence dressed for the opera. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than Elena's car. Dark hair swept back from a face all hard angles and darker intentions. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, like nearly black, ancient and knowing, looking at her like he could see straight through to every broken piece she'd been trying to hold together. "Can I help you?" Nolan's voice carried the particular condescension he reserved for people he considered beneath him. The stranger ignored him completely. His attention remained fixed on Elena, and something in his expression made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. "I apologize for interrupting," he said, still not looking at Nolan. "But I couldn't help overhearing parts of your conversation." Elena's blood turned to ice. Oh God, what had he heard? Nolan's hand tightened on her back, fingernails biting through fabric. "I'm sure you're mistaken. This is a private dinner." "Is it?" Now the stranger's eyes cut to Nolan, and something in his gaze made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Because, from where I was sitting, it sounded more like a hostage situation. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Nolan's face flushed red. "I don't know who the hell you think you are." "Lucien DeMarco." He said it simply, like the name should mean something. And from the way the color drained from Nolan's face, apparently it did. Elena had heard that name before. Whispered in the faculty lounge at school, mentioned in news reports about Chicago's complex business landscape, always with a careful, neutral tone that suggested powerful people had learned not to speak too freely about Lucien DeMarco's affairs. Businessman, they called him. Though everyone seemed to understand that was a polite word for something far more complicated. "Mr. DeMarco," Nolan said, his lawyer voice sliding into place, smooth and professional. I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Lucien's attention returned to Elena, and she felt pinned beneath the weight of it. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The restaurant had gone quiet around them, or maybe that was just the blood rushing in her ears. Do you want to leave here safely? The question detonated in her chest. Want. When was the last time anyone had asked her what she wanted? When was the last time her desires had mattered at all? She's fine, Nolan said quickly, his hand sliding to Elena's elbow in what probably looked like a supportive gesture. His grip was iron. We're just heading home. I wasn't asking you. Lucien's voice could have cut glass. And if you touch her one more time, I'm going to break every finger on that hand. Someone behind them gasped. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Nolan's face contorted into something ugly. You're threatening me? Do you have any idea who I am? My father is a judge. I know. Lucien took a single step forward, and somehow that small movement contained enough menace to make Nolan stumble backward. And I'm someone who stops giving a damn about judges and lawyers and anyone else when I watch a man terrorize a woman in public. He wasn't yelling, wasn't even raising his voice, but every word landed with the force of a physical blow. Elena. Her name in his mouth sounded different, gentler. That is your name, right? She managed a nod, though her entire body had started shaking. I'm offering you a choice. Lucien pulled a card from his jacket pocket, held it out to her. You can walk out that door with him. Or you can come with me, right now, tonight. My car is outside. I have security. I can make sure you get somewhere safe. This is insane, Nolan sputtered. Elena, tell him. But Elena wasn't looking at Nolan anymore. She was staring at the business card in Lucien DeMarco's outstretched hand, like it was a life raft in an ocean that had been drowning her for 2 years. A choice. He was offering her a choice. If you leave with me, Lucien continued, his voice steady and sure, Nolan doesn't follow. He doesn't call. He doesn't show up at your school or your apartment or anywhere else. Because if he does, he'll answer to me. And I promise you, counselor. His eyes cut to Nolan, black and merciless. You don't want that conversation. You can't just... Nolan started. Can't I? Lucien's smile was a razor blade. Try me. Elena's hand moved before her brain caught up. She reached out, fingers trembling so hard she could barely grasp the card, and took it from Lucien's hand. The moment her fingers closed around the embossed paper, something fundamental shifted in the air. Nolan grabbed her wrist. Elena, don't be stupid. He's a criminal. Everyone knows what he is. Let go of her. Lucien's voice went sub-zero. Now. She's my girlfriend. We've been together 2 years. Let go. 2 men materialized from the shadows near the restaurant entrance. Both wore dark suits. Both looked like they knew a dozen ways to hurt someone without leaving visible marks. They didn't touch Nolan, didn't even speak. Just stood there, bracketing him, their presence a clear message. Nolan's hand dropped from Elena's wrist like he'd been burned. Elena, he said, his voice cracking now, desperation bleeding through the polished veneer. Baby, please, don't do this. Whatever you think is happening, stop talking. Lucien didn't move, but something in his posture suggested he was seconds away from violence. You've said enough. He extended his hand to Elena, not grabbing, not demanding, just offering. Last chance, he said quietly. You want to walk out of here, or you want to stay? Every instinct Elena had developed over 2 years of survival screamed at her to stay silent, stay small, don't make things worse. Nolan would make her pay for this later, make her regret even considering, but there wouldn't be a later. Not if she took this hand. Not if she trusted this dangerous stranger more than the man who'd spent 2 years teaching her to stop trusting herself. Elena looked at Nolan, really looked at him, saw the fury building behind his eyes, the calculations already spinning in his lawyer's brain, planning how to make her suffer for this humiliation. Then she looked at Lucien DeMarco, feared businessman, rumored criminal, complete stranger, and saw something she hadn't seen in another human being in longer than she could remember. Respect. She put her hand in his. Lucien's fingers closed around hers, steady and warm, and Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Smart girl, he murmured, then louder. Gentlemen, please make sure Mr. Pierce makes it safely to his vehicle. And if he has any thoughts about following us, remind him why that would be a poor decision." The two security men nodded. One of them actually smiled. Lucien guided Elena toward the exit, his hand never leaving hers, his body positioned between her and Nolan like a shield. Behind them, she could hear Nolan starting to shout, his voice rising in impotent rage, but the sound got swallowed by distance and rain and the blood pounding in her ears. The restaurant door swung open. Cold Chicago air hit Elena's face, smelling of rain and concrete and freedom. A black SUV waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted dark. The driver stepped out immediately. Another man in a dark suit, this one older, with kind eyes and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "This is Marcus," Lucien said, opening the rear door. "He's worked for me for 15 years. You're safe with him." Elena hesitated at the threshold of the vehicle. Her entire body shook. This was insane. She didn't know this man, didn't know where he was taking her. Everything she'd ever been taught about stranger danger screamed at her to run. But run where? Back to Nolan? Back to the apartment where he knew every hiding place, controlled every exit? "I know you're scared," Lucien said quietly, reading her hesitation. "And you have every right to be. But I give you my word, my actual word, Elena, that no one in my employ will harm you. Not tonight, not ever." "Why?" The question tore out of her, raw and desperate. "Why are you doing this?" Something flickered across Lucien's face. Old pain, maybe, or a memory that still had teeth. "Because someone should have done it for my mother," he said simply. And they didn't. The honesty of it hit Elena like a fist to the sternum. She climbed into the SUV. Lucien slid in beside her, maintaining careful distance, not crowding her against the door. Marcus closed them in and moved around to the driver's seat with efficient professionalism. As they pulled away from the curb, Elena twisted in her seat to look back at Bellarosa. Nolan stood on the sidewalk in the rain, surrounded by Lucien's security team, his perfect hair plastered to his skull, his expensive suit darkening with water. He looked small, powerless. For the first time in 2 years, he looked like what he actually was. Just a man, not a monster, not a god, just a cruel, pathetic man who got off on hurting someone smaller than himself. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Somewhere secure," Lucien said, "one of my properties. You'll have your own space, your own room, locked door. In the morning, we'll figure out next steps." "Next steps?" Elena's laugh came out broken. "I don't even know what that means. I don't have anywhere to go. My apartment is in his name. My phone is on his plan. Everything I own can be replaced." Lucien's voice carried absolute certainty. "Things are things, Elena. You're alive. You got out. That's what matters." Tears burned hot behind Elena's eyes. She pressed her palm against the cool window glass, watching Chicago blur past in streaks of neon and rain. "He'll come after me," she whispered. "You don't know him. He doesn't let go. He'll find me and He won't." The certainty in those 2 words made her turn to face him. Lucien met her gaze steadily. "I know men like Nolan Pierce. I've dealt with them my whole life. Bullies who use power and fear because deep down they're cowards. They fold the second someone actually fights back." "You don't understand." "I do." Something ancient and tired moved behind Lucien's eyes. "More than you know." The SUV turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the black expanse of Lake Michigan spreading out to their right, infinite and dark. Elena watched the lights of the city reflect on the water's surface, fractured and beautiful. She'd lived in Chicago her whole life, but couldn't remember the last time she'd really seen it. Nolan had made her world so small, just the apartment, the school, the few places he allowed her to exist. "What do you do?" she asked suddenly. "I mean, I know what people say, but I run a family business," Lucien said carefully. "Import, export, real estate, transportation. Some of it walks the line of what's strictly legal. Some of it doesn't." The honesty startled her. "You're telling me you're a criminal?" "I'm telling you I'm complicated." He turned to look at her fully, and there was no deception in his face. "My family built an empire on things that would make you uncomfortable. I'm trying to steer us toward legitimacy. It's slow work, messy, and there are people inside and outside my organization who'd prefer I fail." So why risk all that for me? Elena shook her head. We're strangers. I'm nobody. You're not nobody. The fierceness in his voice caught her off guard. You're a woman who survived 2 years with a monster and still had the courage to take a stranger's hand. That's not nothing. Elena's throat tightened. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. They drove in silence for a while, the city giving way to suburbs, then to expensive neighborhoods with gates and manicured lawns hidden behind stone walls. Finally, Marcus turned down a private drive flanked by iron gates that swung open automatically. The house, no, estate, sprawled across what had to be several acres. Modern architecture blended with old-world elegance, all stone and glass and subtle security measures Elena's racing mind cataloged despite herself. Cameras, motion sensors, armed guards stationed at intervals that tried to look casual but weren't. Welcome to my home, Lucien said as Marcus pulled up to the main entrance. I know it's overwhelming, but you're safe here. I promise. Elena climbed out of the SUV on legs that barely held her weight. Exhaustion crashed over her in waves, adrenaline debt from hours of terror finally coming due. A woman emerged from the front door, petite and fierce-looking, with dark hair cut in a sharp bob, and eyes that assessed Elena with clinical precision. She wore jeans and a cashmere sweater, clearly roused from a relaxed evening. This is Valentina, Lucien said. My sister. Jesus, Lucien. Valentina looked Elena up and down, and her expression softened immediately. Come inside, honey. Let's get you settled. I don't have anything, Elena heard herself say. My purse is still at the restaurant. My phone. We'll handle it, Valentina said firmly, taking Elena's arm with surprising gentleness. First things first. Have you eaten? Elena couldn't even remember. The dinner at Bella Rosa felt like it happened in another lifetime. Valentina guided her through a foyer that belonged in architectural magazines, down a hallway lined with art. Elena was too overwhelmed to process, and finally into a guest suite that was larger than the entire apartment she'd shared with Nolan. Bathrooms through there, Valentina said, pointing. Toiletries are stocked. There's comfortable clothes in the closet. Might be a little big, but better than that. She gestured at Elena's navy dress with distaste. Locks on the inside of the door. No one comes in unless you invite them. Understood? Elena nodded numbly. Good. Valentina squeezed her shoulder. I'm going to send up some food. You don't have to eat it, but it'll be there if you want it. And Elena? Yeah? You're safe now. I know you don't believe that yet, but you will. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Elena stood in the middle of the pristine room, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Slowly, mechanically, she walked to the door and turned the lock. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home made something inside her finally break. She collapsed against the door and sobbed. All the fear she'd swallowed, all the screams she'd strangled, all the terror she'd learned to carry like a second skin. It poured out of her in waves that felt like they might never stop. Somewhere in another wing of the house, Lucien DeMarco stood in his study and made a phone call. I need everything you can find on Nolan Pierce, he said quietly. Attorney. Works at Pierce and Callahan. And I mean everything. Every case, every parking ticket, every woman he's ever dated. I want to know where his weak spots are. The man on the other end asked a question. Because he threatened someone under my protection, Lucien said, his voice dropping into something cold and final. And I'm going to make sure he never threatens her again. He hung up and moved to the window, looking out at the dark grounds, the distant lights of Chicago glowing on the horizon. Somewhere in that city, Nolan Pierce was probably plotting his next move, figuring out how to reclaim what he considered his property. Lucien smiled without humor. Let him try. Elena woke to sunlight cutting through unfamiliar curtains and spent 3 full seconds in perfect peace before memory crashed back like a tidal wave. The restaurant. Nolan's threats. Lucien DeMarco's hand extended in the rain. She sat up too fast, head spinning, heart hammering against her ribs. The guest suite materialized around her in sharp detail. Cream walls, expensive furniture, the kind of quiet that came from real wealth and heavy doors. Her navy dress lay crumpled on the floor, where she'd stripped it off sometime during the night. She wore an oversized t-shirt she didn't remember putting on. The clock on the nightstand read 9:47 a.m. Panic spiked through her chest. School. She was supposed to be at school. Her second graders would be lining up for reading groups right now, wondering where Miss Vale was. And she hadn't called in. Her phone. She didn't have her phone. Elena's breath came faster, shallower. The walls seemed to close in despite the room's size. She'd broken the first rule of survival. Never make Nolan angry. And she hadn't just made him angry. She'd humiliated him in public, walked out of a restaurant with another man, disappeared for an entire night without permission or explanation. He would destroy her for this. A soft knock at the door made her flinch hard enough to hurt her neck. "Elena?" Valentina's voice came through the wood, careful and measured. "I've got coffee and some clothes. Can I come in?" Elena's throat closed around any response. She managed a sound that might have been yes. The door opened slowly. Valentina entered carrying a tray with coffee, orange juice, and what looked like fresh croissants. She'd changed from last night's casual wear into sleek black pants and a silk blouse, hair pulled back in a severe ponytail that somehow made her look more dangerous instead of professional. "Morning," she said, setting the tray on the side table. "You look like hell." The bluntness startled a laugh out of Elena. It came out broken and slightly hysterical. "Yeah, well," Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "That tracks." Valentina moved to the windows and pulled the curtains open wider, flooding the room with October light. "Lucian's handling some business this morning, but he asked me to make sure you had everything you needed, starting with these." She produced a shopping bag that definitely hadn't been there a second ago. Jeans, a couple shirts, undergarments. I guessed your size, so apologies if anything's off. Toiletries are already in your bathroom. And this, she held up a phone, brand new in its packaging, is yours. Clean number. No way for anyone to track it. Elena stared at the phone like it might explode. "I can't accept this, any of this. I don't even know you people." "True." Valentina set the phone down deliberately. "But you also don't have a lot of options right now. So maybe save the pride for when you're not running on 3 hours of sleep and a nervous breakdown." The words should have stung. Instead, they felt almost comforting. No false sweetness, no performing concern, just brutal honesty. "I need to call my school," Elena said. "My students—" "Already handled." Valentina poured coffee into an actual china cup, handed it over. "Lucien's assistant called first thing this morning. Family emergency. They've got a substitute lined up." He had no right. He had every right to make sure you didn't do something stupid like go back to your normal routine while your ex-boyfriend is out there losing his mind. Valentina's voice went hard. "Nolan Pierce spent half the night calling the restaurant, demanding to know where you went. Then he tried calling the police, filed a missing persons report." Ice flooded Elena's veins. "Oh, God." "Relax. The detective who caught the case happens to owe Lucien a favor. Report got lost in the shuffle." Valentina's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Nolan's connections aren't as solid as he thinks they are. Elena set down the coffee before her shaking hands could spill it. "This is insane. I can't just hide here forever. I have a life, a job. What you need is to slow down and think." Valentina sat on the edge of the bed, close enough to be present but far enough to not crowd. "I know this feels overwhelming, but trust me when I say Lucian knows what he's doing. He's gotten people out of worse situations." "What kind of people?" "The kind who needed getting out." Valentina's expression shuddered. "My brother has a complicated relationship with power and violence, but one thing he doesn't tolerate, not ever, is men who hurt women. Our father was a brutal son of a bitch. Our mother paid the price until the day she died. Lucian swore he'd never let that happen to anyone else if he could prevent it." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. "So this is what?" Elena's voice cracked. "Some kind of redemption project?" "No." Valentina's eyes blazed. "This is Lucien trying to be better than the men who raised him, and maybe you could cut him some slack for that." Shame burned through Elena's chest. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Finish your coffee, get dressed, then come downstairs." Valentina stood, all business again. "We've got work to do." 30 minutes later, Elena descended a curved staircase that belonged in a European villa and found herself in a kitchen 3 times the size of her old apartment. Valentina stood at an industrial-grade espresso machine, pulling shots with the focused intensity of a surgeon. Across the marble island, a man in an expensive suit scrolled through a tablet, making notes with vicious efficiency. He looked up when Elena entered, dark eyes assessing her with uncomfortable precision. "Marcus Bellamy," he said, offering his hand. "Head of security." Elena recognized him from last night, the driver with the kind eyes and the scar. In daylight, he looked harder, more dangerous. "We need to talk about threat assessment," Marcus said without preamble. "Nolan Pierce is a problem, a fixable problem, but we need your cooperation." Elena's stomach dropped. "What kind of cooperation?" "Information." Valentina slid a fresh espresso across the counter. "Everything you know about him, his routines, his contacts, his weaknesses. Where he keeps important documents, who he's afraid of, what makes him unravel." "I don't understand what you're asking me to do." "We're asking you to help us protect you." Marcus pulled up a photograph on his tablet, turned it to face her. "This was taken outside your school at 7:30 this morning." The image showed Nolan's black Mercedes parked across the street from Lincoln Elementary. Nolan himself visible through the windshield, staring at the building's entrance. Elena's knees went weak. She gripped the counter to stay upright. "He's hunting," Marcus said quietly. "And if we don't get ahead of this, he's going to escalate. Men like Nolan don't respond well to rejection. They respond to power. So we need to show him exactly how outmatched he is." "You want me to weaponize my trauma?" Elena's voice came out flat. "Dead. We want you to survive." Valentina's tone softened fractionally. "And sometimes survival means fighting dirty." Before Elena could respond, Lucian entered through a side door, phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved from granite. He wore different clothes than last night, charcoal slacks, white shirt rolled to the elbows, no tie. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I don't care what his father says," Lucian said into the phone, his voice ice and razors. "Pierce comes near her again. I'm done being diplomatic." "Yeah. Make sure he understands that." He hung up, pocketed the phone, and finally seemed to register Elena standing there looking like a frightened animal. His entire demeanor shifted. The dangerous edge smoothed into something gentler, though no less intense. "You're up," he said. "Simple observation, no pressure." "Your sister says you've been busy." Elena hated how small her voice sounded. "Laying groundwork." Lucien moved to the coffee machine, began making himself an Americano with the ease of ritual. "Nolan's father called my attorney an hour ago. Seems to think we kidnapped you. I explained very clearly that you left of your own free will, and that any attempt to harass you further would be met with legal and extra-legal consequences." "Extra-legal." Elena tasted the word. "You mean illegal." "I mean effective." Lucien met her eyes over the rim of his cup. "I'm not going to lie to you, Elena. What I do, how I operate, it exists in gray areas, but I've never hurt someone who didn't deserve it, and I've never broken my word to someone under my protection." "I didn't ask for your protection." "No." His voice went soft, dangerous in a completely different way. "You asked for escape. I'm giving you the space to figure out what comes next. If you want to leave right now, Marcus will drive you anywhere you want to go. No questions, no guilt. Your choice." The word hung between them. Choice. Valentina and Marcus had gone very still, watching this exchange like it mattered deeply. Elena thought about Nolan parked outside her school, thought about going back to the apartment that felt like a cage, the job she loved now tainted by fear, the life that had stopped being hers somewhere along the way. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be the kind of person who fights back." "Then learn." Lucien set down his coffee, walked around the island until he stood a careful 3 feet away, close enough to be present, far enough to give her space. "You survived 2 years with a predator. You had the courage to walk out a door when someone offered you a hand. That's not weakness, Elena. That's strength you haven't learned to recognize yet." Something cracked open in her chest. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Marcus pulled out a chair. "Sit. Talk. Tell us everything." The next 3 hours were brutal. Elena told them things she'd never said out loud. The first time Nolan hit her, disguised as an accident during an argument. The tracking app he'd installed on her phone. The way he'd slowly cut her off from friends, making each person seem unreasonable or untrustworthy, until her world narrowed to just him. The financial control. He'd convinced her to put everything in his name for tax purposes, leaving her with nothing of her own. Marcus took notes with clinical precision. Valentina's expression grew progressively darker. Lucian stood at the window, back to the room, but Elena could see his reflection in the glass, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, the white-knuckled grip on his coffee cup. "The night you tried to leave," Marcus said carefully. "6 months ago. Walk me through what happened." Elena's throat closed. I know it's hard, but I need to understand his pattern." She forced the words out. "I packed a bag while he was at work. Went to the police station on Monroe. The officer who took my statement was nice, professional. I showed him the bruises. He photographed everything, took down my information." "Officer's name?" "Brennan. Patrick Brennan." Valentina cursed softly. Marcus made a note. "What happened after you filed the report?" Lucian asked, still not turning around. "Nolan came home early. He was calm, terrifyingly calm." Elena's hands twisted in her lap. "He sat me down and showed me his phone. Text messages from Officer Brennan. Pictures of my statement, everything I'd said. Nolan told me the report would disappear, that nobody would believe me, that his family owned this city and I was nobody." "What did he do next?" Marcus's voice had gone very quiet. Elena couldn't say it. The memory sat in her throat like broken glass. "He doesn't need details," Lucien said sharply, finally turning around. His eyes blazed. "We get the picture." Marcus nodded slowly. "Brennan's going to be a problem. He's on Nolan's payroll, probably others too. Then we go around them." Lucian's voice carried absolute certainty. "Federal charges, stalking across state lines, wire fraud, I don't care what it takes. We bury him so deep he never sees daylight again." "That requires evidence," Valentina pointed out. "Witnesses willing to testify." "So we find them." Lucian looked at Elena. "How many other women do you think Nolan's done this to?" The question landed like a punch. "I don't know," Elena said slowly. "But at the restaurant, before you came over, he mentioned someone from his law firm. A woman he said was overreacting about something. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the way he said it, what's the firm's name?" "Pearson Callahan." Marcus was already pulling it up on his tablet. "I'll have backgrounds on every female employee by end of day." Elena watched him work, watched Valentina and Lucien exchange loaded glances, watched these dangerous people mobilize around her trauma, like it was a military operation. "Why are you doing this?" The question burst out of her. "All of this. You don't know me. I'm just some random woman you overheard in a restaurant. What do you get out of this?" Silence fell heavy and uncomfortable. Lucien moved to the island, braced his hands on the marble, and looked at her with something raw and exposed in his expression. "When I was 13, he said quietly, my mother tried to leave my father, packed bags, made plans, got as far as the front door before he caught her." Elena's breath caught. "He beat her so badly she spent 3 weeks in the hospital, told the doctors she fell down the stairs. Everyone knew it was a lie. No one said a word. Because my father was powerful and my mother was expendable." Valentina had gone very still, staring at her brother like she'd never heard this story before. "She went back to him after that," Lucien continued. "Stayed another 5 years, until cancer took her before he could. And I spent those 5 years watching her disappear piece by piece, knowing I was too young, too powerless to help her." His hands had gone white-knuckled against the marble. "So yeah, Elena, I'm doing this for a stranger, because maybe if someone had done it for my mother, she'd have lived long enough to see me grow up. Maybe she'd have known there was another option." The confession sat between them like a living thing. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. "Don't be." Lucien's voice went rough. "Just let us help you. Let us make sure he can't do this to you or anyone else." Before Elena could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression went carefully blank. "We have a visitor," he said. "Front gate. Nolan Pierce." The room went electric. "How did he find this place?" Valentina demanded. "Followed the car last night, probably. Or made an educated guess." Marcus was already moving toward the hallway. "He's not alone. 2 men with him. Could be lawyers. Could be muscle." Elena stood so fast her chair scraped violently against the floor. I can't see him. I can't. You don't have to. Lucian's voice cut through her rising panic. Valentina, take Elena upstairs. Marcus, get security in position. Nobody touches Nolan, but make it very clear he's not welcome. What are you going to do? Elena asked. Lucien's smile was cold enough to freeze blood. Have a conversation. Valentina gripped Elena's elbow, firm but not painful. Come on, you don't need to see this. But Elena couldn't move, couldn't look away from Lucian's face, from the transformation happening in his expression. The gentle man who'd made her coffee was disappearing, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. This was who he really was. Not the savior from last night, the king of an empire built on violence and fear. And Elena had invited herself into his world thinking he was rescue. Elena, Valentina tugged harder. Now! This time Elena let herself be led away, up the stairs, back to the guest suite that felt less like sanctuary and more like a gilded cage. Valentina locked them both inside and moved immediately to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see the front drive. Don't, Elena said. I don't want to see. Then don't look. But Elena couldn't help it. She moved to the window despite every instinct screaming at her to hide. Below, Nolan stood beside his black Mercedes, flanked by two men in suits. He looked perfect as always, hair-styled, expression-controlled, the picture of reasonable concern. To anyone watching who didn't know better, he'd look like a worried boyfriend trying to check on his missing girlfriend. The front door opened. Lucien emerged, Marcus and two other security personnel forming a loose perimeter behind him. Elena couldn't hear the conversation through the glass, but she could read the body language. Nolan gesturing, probably explaining very rationally why he was there. Lucien standing perfectly still, arms crossed, face carved from stone. Marcus's hand resting casually near his hip, where Elena was certain he carried a weapon. Then Nolan said something that made Lucien take a single step forward. The two men with Nolan immediately tensed, hands moving inside their jackets. Marcus and the security team mirrored the movement. For 5 endless seconds, the scene balanced on the edge of violence. Then Lucien laughed. The sound carried up to the window, dark and mocking. He said something short, dismissive, turned his back on Nolan and walked toward the house. Nolan's face contorted with rage. He lunged forward. Marcus moved like a striking snake, intercepting him before he'd made it 2 steps. The two men with Nolan drew weapons. Lucien's security did the same. Everything froze. Jesus, Valentina breathed. Marcus said something low and deadly. Nolan's face went white. Slowly, he stepped back, hands raised in surrender. The men with him holstered their weapons. Everyone backed away from everyone else in careful choreography. Nolan climbed into his Mercedes, sat there for a long moment, staring at the house, at the window where Elena stood. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze, the promise in it. Then he drove away. Elena's legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the expensive carpet, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Hey, Valentina crouched beside her. You're okay. He's gone. He knows I'm here. Elena couldn't breathe. He knows, and he'll tell people, and my job will find out, and your job already knows you're dealing with a family emergency. And if they have questions, Lucien's lawyers will handle it. You don't understand. Hysteria clawed up Elena's throat. I can't hide forever. Eventually, I have to go back to my life. And when I do, he'll be waiting. Valentina's expression hardened. Then we make sure when you go back you're protected. Restraining order, security detail, whatever it takes. A restraining order is just paper. It won't stop him. No, but Lucien will. The certainty in her voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified Elena more than Nolan did. Because Valentina wasn't talking about legal protection. She was talking about something darker, more permanent. And Elena was starting to realize exactly what kind of people she'd gotten involved with. I need to be alone, she whispered. Valentina studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll be right outside if you need anything. She left, the door clicking shut with horrible finality. Elena sat on the floor of her golden cage and finally let herself cry. Not the broken sobs from last night. Something deeper. Grief for the life she'd lost, the person she used to be before Nolan taught her to be afraid of her own shadow. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she stood up, walked to the bathroom, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked haunted, hollow, defeated. Elena made a decision. She was done being that woman. 2 days passed in strange, suspended animation. Elena stayed at the estate, learning its rhythms. Valentina brought meals and carefully neutral conversation. Marcus updated her on Nolan's movements. He'd returned to work, was maintaining his public persona, but had hired a private investigator to track her down. Lucian kept his distance. She saw him occasionally, always at the periphery, working in his study, taking phone calls in the garden, moving through his own house like a ghost who didn't quite belong anywhere. He never pushed, never demanded her attention or gratitude, just existed in her orbit, present but not invasive. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made Elena angry. On the third morning, she found him in the kitchen at dawn, making espresso in the gray pre-light. He looked exhausted. Shadows carved deep beneath his eyes, stubble darkening his jaw, expensive clothes rumpled like he'd slept in them. "Can't sleep?" Elena asked from the doorway. He turned, surprise flickering across his face, before settling back into careful neutrality. "Occupational hazard. You?" "Bad dreams." Lucien pulled a second cup from the cabinet without asking, began making her a drink with muscle memory precision. "Want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." Elena moved into the room, accepted the espresso he offered. "I want to talk about what happens next." "Next?" "I can't stay here indefinitely. I have a job, a life." "You said it yourself. This is my choice, so I'm choosing to go back." Lucien's jaw tightened. "It's too soon." "It's been 3 days." "Exactly. Nolan's still in hunting mode. Give it time. Let him think you've disappeared. Eventually he'll what?" Elena's voice went sharp. "Move on?" "Men like Nolan don't move on. They escalate. You said that yourself." "So we build a case against him. Get a restraining order that actually means something. Make it legally dangerous for him to come near you. And in the meantime, I hide, become someone else, let him steal my entire existence?" "Better hidden than dead." The words hung in the air like a grenade. Elena set down her cup with deliberate care. "Is that what you think will happen? That he'll kill me?" "I think he's dangerous." Lucian wouldn't meet her eyes. "And I think you're not taking that seriously enough. I lived with him for 2 years. I know exactly how dangerous he is." Elena's hands had started shaking again. She gripped the counter to steady them. "But I'm done letting fear run my life. I'm done letting him win." "This isn't about winning. It's exactly about winning." The words exploded out of her. "Don't you get it? Every day I stay here, every day I hide, he wins. Because he's still controlling me, still dictating what I can and can't do, just from a distance now." Lucien finally looked at her, and the raw emotion in his face stole her breath. "I can't protect you if you go back," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you to help me protect myself." Silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. "You're terrified," Elena said softly. "Not of Nolan, of failing, of watching another woman get hurt because you couldn't stop it." The muscle in Lucian's jaw jumped. "That's not—" "It is, and I understand. But I can't live my life trying to heal your trauma along with my own." Elena's voice cracked. "I need to do this. For me. Please." Lucien closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked impossibly young, vulnerable in a way that didn't match the dangerous man everyone said he was. "Okay," he said finally, "we do it your way, but with conditions." "What conditions?" "Security detail. Marcus assigned someone to shadow you. Non-communicable phone that only I, Valentina, and Marcus can reach. And you actually promise me, Elena, that at the first sign of trouble, you call." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle this alone. But the truth was, she was terrified, and having backup didn't mean weakness. "Okay," she said. "Okay," Lucien echoed. They stood there in the gray morning light, 2 broken people trying to figure out how to be less broken together. Then Lucien's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor changed. "I need to take this." He stepped into the hallway, voice dropping to a low murmur Elena couldn't quite hear. But she caught fragments, names she didn't recognize, phrases that sounded like business. When he returned, his expression had gone carefully blank. "Marcus needs me to handle something," he said. "Probably be gone most of the day. You good here?" "Fine." He hesitated at the door like he wanted to say something else, then just nodded and left. Elena finished her espresso alone, watching the sun rise over the manicured grounds, and wondered what kind of business required Lucian's personal attention. She had a feeling she didn't want to know. By noon, restlessness had her pacing the guest suite like a caged animal. Valentina had left for meetings of her own. Marcus was somewhere on the property. The house felt enormous and empty and suffocating all at once. Elena needed air, space, something that felt like freedom. She found a jacket in the closet, expensive leather that definitely didn't belong to her, and slipped out the side door near the kitchen. The ground stretched in every direction, sculpted gardens giving way to natural forest. In the distance, she could see the security gate, the guard station, the perimeter that kept the world out, or her in. She followed a stone path toward what looked like a pond, needing the sound of water, the illusion of peace. The October air smelled of dying leaves and approaching winter. Her phone buzzed, the new one Valentina had given her. Unknown number. Elena's stomach dropped. She almost didn't answer, but something made her slide the call open. "Hello?" Silence. Just breathing. Then, "Did you really think you could hide from me?" Nolan's voice slid through the phone like oil and venom. Elena's entire world tilted sideways. "How did you—" "I own this city, Elena. I own the judges, the cops, the private investigators. Did you honestly believe some gangster could make you disappear?" His laugh was acid. "I know where you are. I know what car you arrived in. I know how many security guards think they're keeping you safe." Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The phone shook in her hand. "Here's what's going to happen," Nolan continued, his voice dropping into that terrifyingly calm register he used before violence. "You're going to walk out that front gate, get in a car I'm sending, and we're going to have a conversation about respect, about consequences, about what happens to women who embarrass me. I'm not... If you don't, I start making calls. Your principal receives very concerning information about your mental state. Your teaching license gets flagged for review. And that little second grader you're always going on about, Emma, the one with the single mom? I know where she lives. I know her mother works 2 jobs and can barely afford rent." Ice flooded Elena's veins. "Don't you dare!" "Then do what I'm telling you. 20 minutes. Black sedan at the gate. Don't make me wait, Elena. You know how I get when I have to wait." The line went dead. Elena stood frozen on the stone path, autumn leaves drifting around her like snow, and felt the trap close around her throat. He'd found her. Of course he'd found her. Men like Nolan always did. And now he was threatening a 7-year-old child to force compliance. Her hands moved on autopilot, pulling up Lucien's contact. Her finger hovered over the call button. At the first sign of trouble, you call. But Lucien was gone, handling business. And by the time he got back, by the time Marcus organized a response, Emma's mother would be getting visits from child services based on anonymous tips. Emma would be terrified. Her whole life upended. Because of Elena. Because Elena had been selfish enough to think she deserved rescue. She couldn't do that to a child. Couldn't let her trauma destroy an innocent family. Elena looked at the phone in her shaking hands, made the decision that would change everything. She didn't call Lucien, she deleted the message thread, and she started walking toward the front gate. Elena made it 15 feet before her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the stone path, gravel biting into her palms, lungs seizing in her chest like something vital had been cut. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered against rock. Nolan's voice still echoed in her skull. That terrible calm, the surgical precision with which he dissected her hope and replaced it with pure terror. 20 minutes. Black sedan. A 7-year-old girl's safety hanging in the balance. Her vision swam. The manicured gardens blurred into watercolor smears of dying autumn. She tried to stand and couldn't, tried to breathe and choked on air that felt thick as water. This was it, the moment she'd been running from since the night Lucien extended his hand, the inevitable conclusion. Men like Nolan didn't lose. They simply waited for the perfect moment to remind you who held the leash. "Miss Vale?" The voice came from behind her, professional and concerned. Elena twisted around to find one of the security guards approaching, a younger man she'd seen patrolling the grounds, his hand already moving toward the radio clipped to his belt. "Are you all right? Do you need medical—" "I'm fine." The lie tasted like copper. Elena forced herself to her feet, legs shaking so badly she had to brace against a decorative planter. Just felt dizzy for a second. The guard's eyes narrowed with obvious skepticism, but before he could press, Elena's brain kicked into survival mode. The same mechanisms that had kept her alive for 2 years with Nolan suddenly roared to life, calculating angles and exits and the terrible mathematics of sacrifice. She couldn't go to the gate. Nolan would be waiting, and whatever he had planned would be worse than anything she could imagine. But she also couldn't stay here and let him destroy an innocent child's life out of spite. There had to be another way. Elena retrieved her phone from the ground with trembling fingers, pulled up Lucien's contact again, stared at the call button, but the memory of Nolan's voice stopped her cold. "I own this city. I own the judges, the cops, the private investigators. What if he was right? What if calling Lucien only made things worse? What if Nolan had people inside Lucien's organization, listening, waiting for Elena to make exactly this mistake?" The paranoia felt rational. After 2 years of gaslighting and control, Elena no longer trusted her ability to distinguish real threats from imagined ones. "Miss Vale?" The guard stepped closer, genuinely worried now. "I really think we should get Marcus—" "No!" The word came out too sharp. Elena softened her tone with effort. "I'm okay. I just need to lie down for a bit. Can you not mention this? I don't want everyone making a fuss." The guard hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and compassion. "Please," Elena added, and hated how easily the begging tone came. "I'm just tired, that's all." Finally he nodded. "All right, but if you need anything, I'll call." She walked back toward the house on autopilot, each step feeling like moving through concrete. The guard watched her go, then returned to his patrol route. The moment he was out of sight, Elena changed direction. Not back to the house, toward the garage. The structure sat at the eastern edge of the property, housing what looked like 6 or 7 vehicles. Through the windows, Elena could see the black SUV from the night Lucien rescued her, a sleek sports car, a vintage Jaguar, and near the back, something more practical, a dark gray sedan that screamed anonymous. The side door was unlocked. Inside, the garage smelled of motor oil and expensive leather. Keys hung on a pegboard near the entrance, each set labeled with meticulous precision. Elena's hands shook as she reached for the sedan keys. She was actually doing this, stealing a car from the man who'd saved her life, running toward the monster who'd spent 2 years destroying it, all to protect a second grader who had no idea she'd become collateral damage in a war Elena never asked to fight. The sedan started with a quiet purr. Elena backed out carefully, heart hammering against her ribs. No alarms sounded, no guards materialized to stop her. She made it to the service road that curved around the main drive, made it past the first security checkpoint. The guard recognized the vehicle, waved her through without question. The front gate loomed ahead. Elena's foot hovered over the brake. This was insane. She should turn around, should trust that Lucien could handle this, should— Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered before she could think better of it. "Good girl," Nolan purred. "I can see you on the security camera. Black gate, sedan pulling up. See how easy it is when you follow instructions?" Elena's stomach lurched. "How are you? Watching you?" "Elena, darling, I've been watching you this whole time. Did you think your little gangster's security was actually secure?" He laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "I had his system compromised before you even arrived. Every room, every camera. I watched you sleep, watched you cry, watched you start to believe you were safe." The violation of it made bile rise in Elena's throat. "Now here's what happens next," Nolan continued, his voice dropping into that familiar, dangerous calm. "You drive through that gate. My car is waiting half a mile down the road. You get in. We have our conversation. And if you're very good, if you apologize correctly, maybe I'll let you come back to me without too much permanent damage." "And Emma?" Elena forced the words past the terror closing her throat. "You'll leave her alone? Emma?" He sounded genuinely confused for a moment. Then he laughed. Oh, sweetheart, there is no Emma threat. I was never going to touch some random kid. I just needed you scared enough to run. The truth hit like a physical blow. There had been no danger, no innocent child caught in the crossfire. Just Nolan, reading her perfectly, knowing exactly which buttons to push to make her self-destruct. And she'd fallen for it. Elena slammed on the brakes 50 feet from the gate. The sedan skidded to a stop, gravel spraying. Her vision went white with rage, so pure it temporarily burned through the fear. You son of a bitch, she breathed. Careful. Nolan's voice went cold. You're not in a position to... Elena hung up, threw the phone onto the passenger seat, and made a decision that probably should have terrified her, but instead felt like the first clear thought she'd had in days. She wasn't running to Nolan. She was running toward the one person who might actually help her end this. Elena reversed hard, spun the sedan around, and drove back toward the house with her foot pressed to the floor. By the time she skidded to a stop in the circular drive, Marcus was already emerging from the front door, weapon drawn, 3 guards fanning out behind him. Someone had clearly reported the unauthorized vehicle movement. Elena stumbled out of the sedan, hands raised. Don't shoot, it's me. Marcus's expression went from combat-ready to utterly baffled in a heartbeat. What the hell are you doing? Where's Lucien? Handling business. I told you. I need him. Elena's voice cracked. Now, Nolan called. He's been watching through your security cameras. He tried to make me leave. I almost... She couldn't finish. Couldn't explain how close she'd come to walking straight back into hell. Marcus holstered his weapon and pulled out his phone in one smooth motion. Valentina, we have a situation. Get Lucien back here immediately. He paused, listening, then, I don't care if he's in the middle of negotiations. Now. He hung up and looked at Elena with something that might have been respect beneath the professional concern. Inside, we need to sweep the entire security system. The next hour was chaos. Marcus's tech team descended on the estate like a surgical strike force, ripping apart every camera, every monitor, every piece of surveillance equipment. What they found made Marcus's face go progressively darker. Sophisticated, one of the techs reported, holding up a piece of hardware smaller than a dime. Military grade. Had to cost serious money and required physical access to install. When? Marcus demanded. Based on the firmware, at least a week ago, maybe longer. Elena's legs went weak. A week ago. Before Lucien even rescued her. Nolan had been preparing for this outcome. Had anticipated every move. She sank onto the leather sofa in Lucien's study, head in her hands, trying to piece together the timeline, trying to understand how Nolan had managed to stay 3 steps ahead. The study door slammed open hard enough to crack against the wall. Lucien stood in the doorway, still wearing the dark suit from whatever meeting he'd been pulled from, his face carved from granite and rage. His eyes found Elena immediately, scanning her for visible injuries with the intensity of a medical examination. Are you hurt? The words came out clipped, controlled, but Elena could hear the fury underneath. No, I'm... Marcus, report. Marcus launched into a tactical breakdown. The compromised security, the phone call, Elena's near escape. With each detail, Lucien's expression grew harder, colder, until he looked like something carved from ice and violence. When Marcus finished, silence fell heavy enough to suffocate. How long have we been compromised? Lucien asked quietly. At least a week, maybe more. So he's seen everything, heard everything. It wasn't a question. Lucien turned to the window, hands clenched behind his back. He knows our security protocols, guard rotations, vehicle assignments, everything we've planned. We're sweeping the entire property, Marcus said, changing all access codes, rotating personnel. He won't... He already has. Lucien's voice could have cut diamonds. He already knows everything he needs. Elena stood on shaking legs. I'm sorry, this is my fault. I should have called you immediately when... This isn't your fault. Lucien spun to face her, and the raw emotion in his expression stole her breath. This is mine. I got complacent, thought my reputation was enough to keep you safe. I was wrong. Lucien, he played us. Lucien's hands curled into fists. Used you as bait to map my defenses, and I walked right into it. Valentina appeared in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. We've got bigger problems. Nolan's father just filed an emergency court order, Claims we're holding Elena against her will. Judge Hartwell signed off on it 20 minutes ago. Hartwell's in their pocket, Marcus muttered. Doesn't matter. Valentina moved into the room, tablet in hand. The order gives police authority to enter this property to perform a welfare check. They're probably already en route. The pieces clicked together in Elena's mind with horrifying clarity. He planned this, all of it. The phone call to make me run, the security breach to prove I was being held captive, the court order to give it legal cover. It's a hostage rescue narrative, Lucian said flatly. He's the concerned boyfriend. We're the criminals who kidnapped his girlfriend. When the police arrive, they find you here, and Nolan gets to play hero while destroying my reputation in the process. Can we fight it? Valentina asked. With what? Lucian's laugh was bitter. We have a guest who's been staying here for 3 days without technically having anywhere else to go. No formal residency, no documentation that she came here willingly beyond her word against his. And our security footage proving she's here voluntarily, compromised by the man filing the complaint. Elena felt the walls closing in. So what do we do? Silence answered her. Even Lucien seemed at a loss, his usual tactical precision faltering against an opponent who'd anticipated every move. I could leave, Elena said quietly. Go somewhere else. A hotel. Remove the entire premise of... That's exactly what he wants. Marcus shook his head. You walk out that gate alone. You're vulnerable. He snatches you within the hour. Then I go to the police myself. File a complaint about the phone call, the threats. With Officer Brennan's colleagues? Valentina's voice dripped sarcasm. The same department that buried your report 6 months ago? They'll take your statement and feed it directly to Nolan. Elena's chest tightened. Every avenue closed. Every option compromised. The trap had been perfect from the beginning, and she'd walked into it thinking she was being rescued. There has to be something, she started. The sound of sirens cut through the afternoon quiet. Marcus moved to the window, pulled back the curtain a fraction. 3 squad cars coming up the drive. Showtime, Valentina muttered. Lucien's entire demeanor shifted. The raw emotion vanished, replaced by the careful mask of a man who'd spent his life navigating dangerous situations. He straightened his tie, smoothed his expression into something neutral and professional. Elena, he said quietly, when they ask you questions, tell the truth. You came here willingly. You're free to leave any time. You've been treated well. Can you do that? What are you going to do? His smile was razor thin. Be exactly who they expect me to be. The doorbell rang. Formal. Official. Marcus exchanged a loaded look with Lucien, then headed toward the entrance. Valentina positioned herself in the hallway, tablet ready, clearly preparing to document everything. Elena stood frozen in the study, listening to Marcus open the door, listening to professional voices announce their purpose, listening to her entire fragile attempt at escape collapse around her. 3 officers entered the foyer, 2 men and a woman, all wearing expressions of careful neutrality. The woman led the group, badge prominently displayed. Detective Sarah Chen, she said, extending her hand to Marcus. We have an emergency court order to perform a welfare check on Elena Vale. Is she on the premises? She is, Marcus said calmly. And she's free to speak with you. This way. He led them toward the study. Elena forced herself to breathe, forced her hands to stop shaking. She was fine. She was safe. She'd tell them the truth, and they'd leave. And Detective Chen entered the study, and her eyes went immediately to Elena. Professional assessment, looking for signs of distress, coercion, physical harm. Ms. Vale? Chen's voice was surprisingly gentle. I'm Detective Chen. We received a court order requesting we check on your welfare. Are you all right? I'm fine, Elena managed. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. I'm here voluntarily. Can we speak privately? Of course. Lucian moved toward the door. We'll give you space. Actually, Mr. DeMarco, I'd like you to stay. Chen's eyes hardened fractionally. Along with you, Mr. Bellamy, I have questions for everyone. Red flags went up immediately in Elena's mind. This wasn't a welfare check. This was an interrogation. Chen pulled out a small notebook. Ms. Vale, how long have you been at this residence? 3 days. And you came here voluntarily? Yes. Can you describe the circumstances that led to your arrival? Elena hesitated. How much should she say? How much could she say without inadvertently giving Nolan ammunition? Ms. Vale, Chen prompted. I was having dinner with my boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend. Elena corrected herself. There was an argument. Mr. DeMarco overheard and offered me a safe place to stay. An argument. Chen wrote something down. Can you elaborate? Nolan was being controlling, threatening. Mr. DeMarco intervened. Intervened how? He asked if I wanted to leave safely. I said yes. Chen's pen paused. And you left a restaurant with a stranger? Went to his private residence? Stayed for 3 days? The way she phrased it made Elena sound either naive or complicit. He was offering help. I needed help. Why didn't you contact the police? The question landed like a trap. Elena's throat closed around the answer, because she'd tried that 6 months ago and it had nearly gotten her killed. I was scared, she said instead. I wasn't thinking clearly. Scared of your boyfriend or scared of Mr. DeMarco? Scared of Nolan. Elena's voice hardened. Not Lucien, never Lucien. Chen's eyebrow rose a fraction. You're on a first-name basis with Mr. DeMarco? Is that a crime? No, but it's interesting. Chen turned to Lucien. Mr. DeMarco, you have a reputation in this city. Connections to organized crime. Multiple investigations into your business practices. Some might say you're not the kind of person who performs random acts of charity. Some might say a lot of things. Lucien's voice was ice. Doesn't make them true. So you're claiming this was purely altruistic? You saw a woman in distress and decided to help? Yes. And it has nothing to do with Nolan Pierce being the son of Judge Pierce? A man who's presided over several cases involving your business interests? The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Lucien's expression never wavered. I don't make decisions based on who someone's father is. I make them based on what's right. How noble. Chen's tone suggested she believed otherwise. Ms. Vale, are you aware of Mr. DeMarco's criminal associations? I'm aware of rumors, Elena said carefully, but in the 3 days I've been here, no one has harmed me or threatened me or done anything except try to help. Help how? By isolating you from your support system? By providing you with a phone that can only contact certain people? Chen pulled out a piece of paper. According to Mr. Pierce's statement, you've been unreachable. Your employer doesn't know where you are. Your friends haven't heard from you. That doesn't sound like help. That sounds like captivity. That's not, Elena started. Ms. Vale, I need you to be honest with me. Chen leaned forward, lowering her voice like they were confidants. If you're being held here against your will, if Mr. DeMarco or anyone in his employ has threatened you, you can tell me. Right now. We can protect you. The sincerity in her voice was almost convincing. Almost. But Elena had spent 2 years reading micro-expressions, learning to detect the difference between genuine concern and performance. And something in Chen's eyes didn't quite match her words. I'm not being held, Elena said firmly. I'm a guest. I can leave whenever I want. Then why haven't you? The question struck like a physical blow. Why hadn't she? Why had she stayed in this gilded cage for 3 days instead of demanding Lucien take her somewhere else? Why had she let herself become dependent on people she barely knew? Because I felt safe, Elena said quietly. For the first time in 2 years, I felt safe. Chen's expression softened fractionally, then hardened again. Safe from what specifically? From Nolan. The name felt like glass in Elena's mouth. He's been abusing me for 2 years. Physically, emotionally, financially. I tried to leave 6 months ago, filed a police report, it disappeared. The officer who took it was friends with Nolan's father. Chen's pen stilled. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Do you have evidence? Elena's hands clenched in her lap. Bruises fade. Threats are hard to record when he controls your phone. But yes, I have evidence. Emails, text messages, medical records from when I went to urgent care claiming I fell downstairs. I'd like to see that evidence. It's at my apartment, which is in Nolan's name, where I can't go safely. Chen studied her for a long moment. Ms. Vale, I'm going to be blunt. Your story has some concerning elements. You left a restaurant with a stranger. You've been staying at his private residence. You have no independent means of contact or transportation. From an outside perspective, this situation looks an awful lot like... Like what? Elena's voice went sharp. Like I'm a victim who finally got rescued, and you're trying to paint my rescuer as a criminal because it's easier than admitting a judge's son is an abuser? Silence crashed through the room. Chen's face went carefully neutral. I'm not trying to paint anyone as anything. I'm trying to establish facts. The fact is, I'm an adult making my own choices, and I choose to stay here until I figure out my next move. Elena stood, anger finally burning through the fear. If you want to help me, detective, investigate Nolan Pierce, pull his history, talk to women he's dated, check with his law firm for complaints, do actual detective work instead of harassing the one person who's treated me like a human being. One of the male officers shifted uncomfortably. Chen's jaw tightened. Ms. Vale, am I free to end this conversation? Chen's eyes flicked to Lucian, then back to Elena. You're not under arrest. Then we're done. Elena moved toward the door. Her legs shook, but held. Thank you for your concern, detective. I'll contact you if my situation changes. She walked out of the study, down the hallway, and out the back door into the garden before her knees finally gave out again. This time, she made it to a stone bench before collapsing. Behind her, she could hear Chen's voice rising, Marcus responding in measured tones, the bureaucratic dance of law enforcement pretending to care while actually serving powerful interests. Elena pressed her palms against her eyes and tried not to scream. Footsteps on gravel announced someone's approach. She didn't look up. They're leaving, Valentina's voice said from above her. Chen's not happy, but there's nothing she can do. You're clearly not being held captive, just isolated and dependent and exactly where Nolan wants me. That's not... It is. Elena finally looked up. Valentina stood silhouetted against the afternoon sun, all sharp edges and barely contained fury. He's been 10 steps ahead this entire time, the security breach, the court order, making me look either like a willing participant in some scheme or a victim too stupid to save herself, and I played right into it. You're not stupid. Then what am I? Elena's voice cracked. Because from where I'm sitting, I traded one cage for another. At least with Nolan, I knew the rules. Valentina sat beside her on the bench, close but not touching. You want to know what I think? Does it matter? I think you're terrified. I think you're exhausted. And I think you're looking for reasons to give up because giving up feels safer than fighting. Valentina's voice went hard. But here's the thing, Elena. My brother doesn't give up. On anyone. And especially not on women who remind him of our mother. The confession landed between them like a grenade. Is that what I am? Elena asked bitterly. A stand-in for his dead mother? No. Valentina's eyes blazed. You're a woman he sees as worth saving. There's a difference. Before Elena could respond, Marcus appeared in the garden doorway, his expression grim. We've got a problem, he said. Chen just called. Nolan Pierce is filing charges against Lucien for kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. Arrest warrants being processed as we speak. The world tilted sideways. That's insane, Valentina snapped. Elena literally just told them she's here voluntarily. Doesn't matter. Judge Hartwell signed off on it. Lucian's being charged with a felony. Marcus looked at Elena, and there was something like pity in his eyes. And you're being named as the victim, whether you want to be or not. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The trap had just gotten tighter, and she'd helped spring it by defending Lucian too passionately, by making it look like maybe she was suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, by, we need to move, Marcus continued. Get Lucien out of the city before they execute the warrant. I've got a safe house upstate. No! Lucien's voice cut through the garden like a blade. He stood in the doorway, perfectly still, perfectly controlled. I'm not running. Lucien, Valentina started. I said no. He moved into the garden, and Elena could see the calculations running behind his eyes. We run. We look guilty. We look guilty. Elena's testimony becomes worthless. This is exactly what Pierce wants. So what do you suggest? Marcus demanded. Let them arrest you? Put you in a cell where Nolan's father has judges and cops on payroll? I suggest we flip the script. Lucian's smile was cold and sharp. Give them exactly what they're not expecting. Elena stood on shaking legs. What does that mean? Lucien looked at her, and something in his expression made her stomach drop. "It means you testify," he said quietly. "Against Nolan, publicly. We file charges of our own: assault, battery, stalking, coercive control. We drag every ugly thing he's done into the light and make him defend himself instead of attacking us." "They won't listen," Elena whispered. "They didn't listen 6 months ago. They won't." "They will if we make enough noise they can't ignore it." Valentina was already pulling out her phone. "I know reporters, good ones, the kind who love taking down powerful families." "This is insane," Elena said. "You want me to go public? Against a judge's son? With your brother facing felony charges? They'll destroy me. They'll destroy all of us." "Probably," Lucien agreed. "But we'll take Nolan down with us. And that's better than letting him win." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Elena looked at these people. This dangerous, complicated family who'd taken her in and defended her and were now willing to immolate their own reputations to give her a chance at justice. And she realized she had a choice to make: run, hide, disappear into whatever new life she could scrape together from the ruins. Or fight. Actually fight. Take every ugly, shameful, terrifying piece of her story and weaponize it against the man who'd spent 2 years teaching her she was powerless. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I need one thing from you." "Name it," Lucien said. "The truth, all of it. Who you really are. What you really do. Because if I'm going to burn my life down, I'm doing it with eyes wide open." Silence fell heavy and uncomfortable. Then Lucien nodded. "Okay, let's have that conversation." He led her back inside, past Marcus's protests, past Valentina's worried glances, into his private study. He closed the door, poured 2 glasses of whiskey despite it being barely 3 in the afternoon, handed one to Elena. "My family built an empire on violence," he said without preamble. "Smuggling, loan sharking, protection rackets. My father was a monster who believed power was the only thing that mattered. He brutalized my mother, brutalized Valentina, turned me into someone I didn't recognize." Elena sipped the whiskey. It burned. "When he died 5 years ago, I inherited an organization built on blood. I've been trying to legitimize it ever since. Real estate, transportation, import-export, all legal, all documented. But I still have enemies. People who want to see me fail. Who'd use anyone close to me as leverage." "Like me," Elena said quietly. "Like you." Lucienne met her eyes. "Nolan's father knows who I am, knows my reputation. He's using it as a weapon. Making you the damsel and me the villain. And the worst part? He's not entirely wrong." "What does that mean?" "It means I've done things, Elena, terrible things, to protect my family, to protect people who needed protecting when the law wouldn't. I've hurt people. I've killed people." The confession came out flat, factual. "I'm not a good man. I'm just trying to be better than I was." Elena's hand shook. She set down the whiskey glass before it could slip. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked for truth." Lucien's voice softened. "And because if we're doing this, if we're actually going to war with Nolan Pierce and his entire corrupt family, you need to know exactly what you're allying yourself with." The room felt too small, too close. Elena could feel the weight of decisions pressing down on her from all sides. She thought about Nolan, about the bruises and the threats and the 2 years of slow suffocation. She thought about Emma, the second grader who'd never actually been in danger but who represented every innocent person whose lives would get caught in the crossfire. She thought about the woman she used to be before Nolan and wondered if that person even existed anymore. Then she looked at Lucien DeMarco, admitted criminal, dangerous man, her only real ally in a fight she couldn't win alone, and made the choice that would define everything that came after. "Okay," she said. "Let's burn it all down." Lucien's expression shifted into something fierce and protective and utterly dangerous. "Then we start now," he said. "Tomorrow, I let them arrest me. You go to the media. We make this so public, so ugly, that Nolan can't hide behind his father's reputation anymore. And if it doesn't work," his smile was razor sharp, "then at least we went down fighting. Elena nodded, picked up the whiskey glass, drained it in one burning swallow. Outside the study window, the sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. And somewhere in that city, Nolan Pierce was probably celebrating what he thought was his inevitable victory. He had no idea the war was just beginning. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, playing through scenarios, imagining every way tomorrow could go catastrophically wrong. At 2 in the morning, she gave up pretending and walked downstairs. The house was dark except for a light in Lucian's study. She found him at his desk, surrounded by documents, a half-empty whiskey bottle at his elbow. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, no surprise on his face, like he'd been expecting her. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. Elena shook her head, moved into the room. "I keep thinking about what happens after. If this works? If Nolan actually goes down? What about it? I don't know how to be a person again." The confession tore out of her. "I don't know how to exist without someone controlling every aspect of my life. Even here, I've just replaced Nolan's rules with your protection. I've never actually been free." Lucian studied her for a long moment. Then he stood, moved around the desk, and sat in the chair beside hers. Close, but not crowding. "Freedom's terrifying," he said quietly. "Trust me, I know. When my father died, I thought I'd finally be free. Instead, I just inherited his cage. Different bars, same prison. So how do you do it? How do you break out? You make choices." His voice went soft. "Small ones at first. What you eat for breakfast, what you wear, who you trust. You reclaim yourself piece by piece until you remember who you were before someone tried to remake you." Elena's throat tightened. "I don't remember who that was." "Then you figure out who you want to be now." The words settled between them like a promise. "I'm scared," Elena whispered. "Good." Lucian's hand found hers in the darkness. Not grabbing, just holding. People who aren't scared don't survive what comes next. They sat there in the quiet, two broken people trying to figure out how to be less broken, while outside the window Chicago slept and tomorrow waited with all its terrible possibilities. And neither of them knew that in less than 12 hours, everything would change again in ways they couldn't possibly anticipate. Because Nolan Pierce had one more card to play, and it was the one that would destroy them all. The call came at 6 in the morning, shattering what little sleep Elena had managed to scrape together. Marcus's voice cut through the fog, sharp and urgent. "Turn on the news. Channel 5. Now." Elena fumbled for the remote with numb fingers, heart already racing before her brain caught up. The television flickered to life, morning news anchors with their practiced expressions of concern filling the screen. Then Nolan's face appeared. He sat in what looked like a press conference, flanked by his father, Judge Lawrence Pierce, silver-haired and distinguished, and two attorneys Elena didn't recognize. Nolan wore a navy suit, his expression perfectly calibrated between wounded and brave. Behind him, a banner read, "Domestic Violence Awareness Coalition." "You've got to be fucking kidding me," Elena breathed. The camera zoomed closer as Nolan leaned toward the microphone cluster, hands folded, the picture of composed vulnerability. "I'm here today to speak about something deeply personal," he said, his voice carrying just the right tremor of emotion. "My girlfriend, Elena Vale, has been missing for 4 days. She was last seen leaving Bella Rosa restaurant with Lucien DeMarco, a known criminal with documented ties to organized crime." Elena's vision tunneled. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. "Elena suffers from severe anxiety and depression," Nolan continued, the lie sliding off his tongue like silk. "She's been in treatment for months. I believe she was vulnerable, confused, and Mr. DeMarco took advantage of that vulnerability to manipulate her into leaving with him." The anchor's voice cut in. "Mr. Pierce, are you suggesting she was kidnapped?" "I'm suggesting she was coerced by someone who saw an opportunity to hurt me through her." Nolan's eyes glistened. Actual tears, manufactured on command. "Elena and I have been together 2 years. We've had our struggles, like any couple. But I love her, and I'm terrified that she's being held by dangerous people who are using her as leverage." Judge Pierce leaned into frame, his voice carrying the authoritative weight of decades on the bench. "My son has exhausted every legal avenue to ensure Ms. Vale's safety. We've filed emergency orders. We've cooperated fully with law enforcement. But Mr. DeMarco has extensive resources and connections that allow him to evade accountability. One of the attorneys spoke up, a sharp-featured woman with predatory eyes. We're announcing today that we're filing a civil suit against Lucien DeMarco for unlawful imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and criminal conspiracy. Additionally, we're calling for a federal investigation into his criminal enterprise. The room spun. Elena gripped the remote so hard, plastic creaked. This is a coordinated attack, Marcus's voice said through the phone she'd forgotten she was holding. They're going nuclear, trying to bury Lucien before we can get your story out. On screen, a reporter asked, "What message do you have for Elena if she's watching?" Nolan looked directly into the camera, and Elena swore he could see straight through the screen into her soul. "Elena, baby, I know you're scared. I know these people have convinced you that I'm the enemy, but I love you. Come home, please. Let me help you." The performance was flawless, Oscar-worthy, and it made Elena want to put her fist through the television. "Turn it off," she said. "Elena, turn it off." She hurled the remote across the room. It shattered against the wall, plastic shrapnel scattering across expensive carpet. Her hands shook so violently she had to press them flat against her thighs to stop the tremors. The door burst open. Lucien stood in the threshold, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looking like he hadn't slept at all. Valentina appeared behind him, tablet in hand, her expression murderous. "Tell me you didn't see that," Elena said. "Every channel." Valentina's voice was ice. "He's doing the rounds. CNN, Fox, local news, playing the concerned boyfriend perfectly." Lucien moved into the room, his presence somehow making the space feel smaller and safer simultaneously. "This changes the timeline. We need to respond today. Now." "With what?" Elena's voice cracked. "He just told the entire city I'm mentally unstable and you're holding me hostage. Who's going to believe anything I say after that?" "People who've been where you are." Valentina pulled up something on her tablet, turned it to face Elena. "While Nolan was making his performance, I was working the phones. I found 3 other women, former girlfriends, one from law school, 2 from his firm, all with similar stories." Elena's breath caught. "They'll testify?" "2 of them will. The 3rd is still too scared, but 2 is enough." Valentina's eyes blazed. "We go public with a press conference of our own. You tell your story, they tell theirs. We show the pattern. Make it impossible for Nolan to claim this is an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. The media will crucify her," Marcus said from the doorway. "Nolan's already shaped the narrative. She'll look like she's either lying or brainwashed. Then we make sure she doesn't look like either." Lucien's voice carried absolute certainty. "We prep her. We control the message. We don't let them twist this into something it's not." Elena stood on legs that barely held her weight. "When?" "This afternoon, 2 o'clock. Valentina was already typing. "I've got a reporter from the Tribune who's been wanting to break this kind of story for years. She'll handle it fairly." "And what about the arrest warrant?" Elena asked, looking at Lucien. "Won't they come for you the moment you show your face in public?" "Probably." His smile was razor sharp. "Let them. It'll make better television." The insanity of it hit Elena like a physical force. These people were willing to orchestrate their own destruction just to give her a fighting chance. And some part of her recognized the manipulation in that too. The savior complex, the white knight syndrome that could just as easily be another kind of cage. But right now, standing in the wreckage of her life with Nolan's performance still echoing in her ears, she'd take any ally she could get. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." The next 6 hours were a blur of preparation that felt like training for psychological warfare. Valentina drilled Elena on anticipated questions, teaching her how to stay calm under hostile interrogation, how to redirect when reporters tried to twist her words, how to convey vulnerability without appearing weak. Marcus ran security scenarios, mapping exit routes from the press conference location, identifying potential threats in the crowd. And Lucien sat beside Elena through all of it, a silent presence that somehow made the impossible feel survivable. At noon, a woman arrived at the estate, late 30s, sharp eyes, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd broken important stories and survived the backlash. She introduced herself as Jessica Reeves, investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune. "I've been following Nolan Pierce for 2 years, she said without preamble, setting up a recording device on the coffee table. Nothing concrete enough to publish, but enough smoke to know there's fire. Your story might be the match that finally burns his house down. Elena told her everything. The gradual isolation, the financial control, the first time he hit her, disguised as an accident, the tracking apps, the destroyed friendships, the police report that disappeared, the night 6 months ago when she tried to leave and learned exactly how powerless she really was. Jessica's expression never changed, but her pen moved faster across her notepad with each revelation. And the other women? She asked. Valentina mentioned, Sarah Chen and Rachel Morrison. Valentina provided files. Both dated Nolan. Both have documented evidence of abuse. Both willing to go on record. Jessica reviewed the documents with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining pathology. When she looked up, something fierce burned in her eyes. This is good, she said. This is really good. Nolan's camp is going to come at you hard. They'll try to discredit you, paint you as unstable or vindictive, or working with Lucien for ulterior motives. Can you handle that? I don't know, Elena said honestly, but I'm going to try. That'll have to be enough. Jessica glanced at her watch. Press conference is at 2. We've got 90 minutes. Let's talk about what you're going to say. By 1:30, Elena was dressed in clothes Valentina had selected. Simple jeans, a white blouse, no jewelry except a small cross necklace that had belonged to her mother. The outfit projected exactly the right image. Ordinary woman, credible victim, someone viewers could relate to. The location was a community center in downtown Chicago, neutral territory with security that Marcus had personally vetted. When they arrived, the parking lot was already filling with news vans, cameras being assembled, reporters comparing notes. Elena's stomach twisted into knots. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. Lucien's voice was steady beside her. You've survived worse than a press conference. This is different. Nolan could be watching, probably is watching. Good. Lucien's hand found hers, squeezed gently. Let him watch you take away his power. They entered through a side door, avoiding the growing media circus in the main hall. Inside a small prep room, 2 women waited. Sarah and Rachel, the other survivors. Both looked terrified, both looked determined. Sarah was petite, dark-haired, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested years of looking over her shoulder. Rachel was taller, blonde, carrying herself with brittle confidence that threatened to shatter at any moment. You must be Elena, Sarah said, extending a shaking hand. Valentina told us about you, about what he did. Did he? Elena couldn't finish the question. Hit me? Yeah. Sarah's laugh was broken glass. Broke my collarbone. Told the hospital I fell off a bike. They believed him because he was charming and I was crying too hard to make sense. He locked me in our apartment for 3 days, Rachel said flatly. No phone, no way to call for help. When he finally let me out, he made me apologize for making him worry. The familiar horror of recognition washed over Elena. These women had lived her nightmare with different details but the same suffocating terror. How did you get away? She asked. Restraining order, Sarah said. Then I changed my name and moved to Minneapolis. Haven't been back to Chicago in 18 months until yesterday. I didn't get away. Rachel's voice went hard. He dumped me when someone prettier came along. I was lucky enough to be disposable. The room fell silent, heavy with shared trauma. Jessica appeared in the doorway. 5 minutes, you all ready? None of them were ready. But they nodded anyway. The walk from the prep room to the press conference felt like walking toward an execution. Elena's legs moved on autopilot, Lucien's steady presence at her back the only thing keeping her from bolting. The main hall was packed, cameras everywhere, reporters jockeying for position, the hot glare of television lights making everything feel surreal and overexposed. A long table had been set up at the front with 4 chairs. Microphones bristled like weapons. Elena took her seat in the center. Sarah and Rachel flanked her on either side. Jessica stood at a podium to the left, looking every inch the professional journalist about to break a major story. The room quieted. Camera shutters clicked like insects. Jessica began. Thank you all for coming. Today we're here to discuss allegations of domestic violence, stalking, and systemic abuse involving Nolan Pierce, attorney at Pierce and Callahan, and son of Judge Lawrence Pierce. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Reporters leaned forward. Elena Vall, Sarah Chen, and Rachel Morrison have agreed to share their experiences publicly. I'll be moderating questions, and I ask that you treat these women with the respect and dignity they deserve. Jessica stepped aside. The spotlight fell on Elena. For 3 endless seconds, Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The faces in the crowd blurred into an indistinct mass of judgment and curiosity. Then she saw Lucy again, standing against the back wall, his dark eyes locked on hers with absolute conviction. "You've survived worse than this." Elena leaned toward the microphone. "My name is Elena Vale. I'm a second-grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary, and for 2 years I was in a relationship with Nolan Pierce that nearly destroyed my life." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. She kept going. "Nolan was charming at first, attentive. He made me feel special, but over time that attention became control. He tracked my phone, monitored my emails, isolated me from friends until I had no one left but him. The cameras devoured every word. He hit me for the first time 8 months into our relationship, claimed it was an accident. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because leaving felt impossible." Sarah reached over and squeezed Elena's hand beneath the table. The gesture gave her strength to continue. "6 months ago, I tried to file a police report. The officer who took my statement was friends with Nolan's father. The report disappeared. When Nolan found out, he—" Her voice cracked. She forced the words out. "He punished me. Badly enough that I never tried to leave again." A reporter called out a question. Jessica shut it down with a glare. 4 days ago, a stranger overheard Nolan threatening me in a restaurant. That stranger offered me safety. I took it. And now Nolan is trying to frame my rescue as kidnapping because he can't accept that I finally got away." She looked directly into the nearest camera, knowing Nolan was watching somewhere. "I'm not unstable. I'm not confused. I'm a survivor. And I'm done letting you control my story." The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction. Jessica managed the chaos with iron control, selecting reporters, keeping things from devolving into feeding frenzy. Sarah spoke next, her voice shaking but clear, describing the broken collarbone and the months of physical therapy, and the panic attacks that still ambushed her in grocery stores. Then Rachel, detailing the psychological torture of isolation and the way Nolan had convinced her she was worthless until she believed it herself. By the time they finished, the atmosphere in the room had shifted from skeptical curiosity to horrified attention. A reporter from CNN raised her hand. "Ms. Vale, Nolan Pierce held a press conference this morning claiming you suffer from mental illness. How do you respond?" "I respond by saying that's exactly the kind of manipulation he's been using for 2 years. Elena's voice went hard. "Convince everyone around the victim that she's crazy so no one believes her when she finally speaks up. It's textbook abuser behavior." "What about your relationship with Lucien DeMarco?" "Some are suggesting that Lucien DeMarco saved my life," Elena cut her off. "Period. Whatever else people want to insinuate is based on assumptions and prejudice, not facts." Another reporter jumped in. "Mr. DeMarco has documented connections to organized crime, and Nolan Pierce has documented connections to a corrupt judicial system that protects abusers." Elena's hands clenched the table edge. "Which would you rather trust? The criminal who helps people or the lawyer who hurts them?" The question landed like a bomb. Uncomfortable shifting rippled through the press corps. Jessica stepped in. "We have time for 2 more questions." A young reporter near the back raised his hand. "Do you have proof of these allegations?" "Yes." Valentina appeared from the side, carrying a box of documents. Medical records, text messages, emails, photographs of injuries, phone logs showing the tracking app, bank statements showing financial control, all documented, all time-stamped, all available for review. She set the box on the table with a heavy thud that echoed through the suddenly silent room. "One more question," Jessica said. An older man in the front row stood. "Ms. Vale, what do you want to happen next?" Elena took a breath. "I want Nolan Pierce charged with assault, battery, stalking, and coercive control. I want every woman he's hurt to know they're not alone. And I want him to face actual consequences for the first time in his privileged life." The words rang out clear and strong. Then the back doors of the conference hall burst open. Nolan strode in flanked by 4 attorneys, his face a mask of righteous fury. Behind him, 2 uniformed police officers followed with obvious reluctance. The room exploded. Reporters surged toward the disruption. Cameras swung to capture the confrontation. Jessica tried to restore order and failed completely. Nolan pushed through the crowd, ignoring shouted questions, his eyes locked on Elena with burning intensity. He reached the front table and slammed both palms down on the surface hard enough to make the microphones jump. "How dare you?" His voice cut through the chaos. "How dare you stand up here and lie about me? About us? You're sick, Elena. You need help. And these people," he gestured at Lucien, at Valentina, at the reporters, "are exploiting you." Elena stood slowly, meeting his gaze across the table. Up close, she could see the cracks in his perfect composure, the rage burning beneath the wounded boyfriend act. "I'm not lying," she said quietly, "and everyone here knows it. You're delusional." Nolan's hands curled into fists. "I gave you everything, loved you, took care of you, and this is how you repay me? By destroying my reputation with lies? I repay you by telling the truth you spent 2 years trying to bury." Something flickered across Nolan's face, shocked that she was fighting back, that she wasn't cowering the way he'd trained her to. One of the police officers stepped forward. "Mr. Pierce, we need to—" "Arrest them." Nolan spun on the officer. "Lucien DeMarco for kidnapping, her for filing false reports. I want charges filed immediately." The officer looked profoundly uncomfortable. "Sir, we can't just— My father is a judge. I'm filing a formal complaint. Arrest them or I'll have your badge." "Actually," a new voice cut through the tension, "you won't." Everyone turned. A woman in a sharp suit and federal badge pushed through the crowd. "Special Agent Lisa Park, FBI. Mr. Pierce, you're under investigation for multiple counts of domestic violence, stalking across state lines, and obstruction of justice." Nolan's face went white. "That's absurd. Officer Brennan is currently in custody for destroying evidence and accepting bribes." Agent Park's voice was clinical. "He's been very cooperative, named you specifically as the source of those bribes." The room went electric. Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras captured every second of Nolan's composure shattering. "This is a setup," he sputtered. "DeMarco orchestrated this whole thing." "Mr. DeMarco didn't orchestrate anything." Park's smile was sharp. "Though I will say, when 3 credible witnesses come forward with documented evidence against the same individual, we tend to take that seriously, especially when that individual is using his father's position to evade accountability." One of Nolan's attorneys tried to intervene. "Special Agent Park, my client is willing to cooperate, but we need assurances." "Oh, your client needs a lawyer who understands how federal indictments work." Park turned to the officers. "Mr. Pierce is not under arrest at this time, but we'd like him to come in for questioning. Voluntarily, of course." It wasn't a request. Nolan knew it. Everyone knew it. For the first time since Elena had known him, Nolan looked genuinely afraid. His eyes found hers across the chaos. "This isn't over," he said, low enough that only she could hear. "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of." "Neither do you." Elena's voice was steel. "About me." The staring contest lasted 3 seconds. Then Nolan turned and walked toward the exit, his attorneys scrambling to follow, police officers flanking him like he might bolt. The moment the doors closed behind him, the room erupted into feeding frenzy. Questions flew from every direction, reporters surging toward the table, the story already morphing into 1,000 different headlines. Jessica restored order with difficulty. "That's all for today. Written statements will be provided within the hour. Thank you." Security, Marcus's people, Elena realized, formed a barrier, guiding her and Sarah and Rachel toward a side exit. Lucien materialized beside Elena, his hand finding her elbow, steadying her as adrenaline crash threatened to take her legs out from under her. They made it to a black SUV parked in the loading zone. Marcus behind the wheel, Valentina already in the passenger seat, laptop open, monitoring the media explosion in real time. Elena collapsed into the back seat, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Sarah and Rachel piled in after her, all 3 women processing what had just happened, the magnitude of what they'd done. "You did it," Valentina said, turning around to look at them. "All of you. That was incredible." "That was terrifying," Sarah corrected, but she was smiling, actually smiling. "Did you see his face?" Rachel laughed, slightly hysterical. "When the FBI showed up? I've never seen him scared before." "Never." Elena couldn't speak, couldn't process. Her entire body felt numb and electric simultaneously. Lucian slid in beside her, closed the door, and the SUV pulled away from the chaos. "Where are we going?" Elena finally managed. "Safe house," Marcus said from the front. "Different location. Nolan knows about the estate. We're not taking chances." They drove in silence for a while, the city sliding past the tinted windows, afternoon light painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Elena's phone, the clean one Valentina had given her, buzzed. She almost ignored it, then saw the name on the screen. Jessica Reeves. She answered. "Hello?" "Turn on the radio," Jessica said without preamble. "Any news station. You need to hear this." Elena gestured to Marcus, who flipped on the satellite radio. A news anchor's voice filled the SUV, breaking developments in the Nolan Pierce domestic violence allegations. Sources close to the investigation report that 2 additional women have come forward since this afternoon's press conference, both claiming abuse by Pierce during previous relationships. Meanwhile, Judge Lawrence Pierce has announced he's recusing himself from all cases involving the DeMarco family and has issued a statement calling for a thorough and impartial investigation into his son's conduct. He's throwing Nolan under the bus, Valentina said with savage satisfaction, protecting his own reputation. Pierce and Callahan Law Firm has placed Nolan Pierce on indefinite administrative leave pending the outcome of the FBI investigation. The Illinois Bar Association has opened an ethics inquiry. Marcus turned down the volume. It's working. The story's getting bigger. More people coming forward. Nolan's entire world is collapsing. Elena should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, she just felt exhausted. "He's going to come after me," she said quietly. "You all heard what he said. This isn't over." "Let him try." Lucian's voice was cold iron. "He's toxic now. Every move he makes is being watched. He tries anything. He destroys himself." "You don't know him like I do." Elena met his eyes. "Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Then we make sure he stays cornered until the FBI builds their case." The SUV turned down a residential street in a neighborhood Elena didn't recognize. Marcus pulled into a driveway attached to a modest 2-story house that screamed suburban normalcy. Nothing like Lucien's estate. Nothing that would draw attention. "We're using this for the next few days," Marcus explained. "Rotating security, no electronic footprint. Nolan won't find you here." They filed inside. The house was furnished but impersonal, clearly a property maintained for exactly this kind of situation. Sarah and Rachel were shown to bedrooms upstairs. Valentina set up her laptop on the dining room table, already fielding calls from reporters and coordinating follow-up interviews. Elena found herself in the kitchen, staring at a refrigerator full of food she had no appetite for, trying to remember what normal people did after destroying their abuser's life on national television. Lucien appeared beside her, close but not touching. "You should eat something." "I'm not hungry." "You should try anyway." Elena turned to face him, and something in her expression must have conveyed the chaos raging inside her because his facade cracked just slightly. The dangerous businessman disappeared, replaced by someone who looked almost as exhausted as she felt. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait. Let the FBI do their job. Let the media do theirs. Let Nolan's world burn down around him while we keep you safe. And after? When it's all over and he's locked up or discredited or whatever happens to men like him?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment. "Then you figure out who you want to be. Build whatever life you choose, without him, without me, if that's what you need." The words hit harder than Elena expected. "You'd just let me walk away after all this?" "I'd hate it." His voice went rough. "But yeah, this was never about keeping you. It was about giving you the choice he took away." Elena's chest tightened. She opened her mouth to respond, to say something meaningful or profound, or... Her phone rang. Unknown number. Every muscle in her body tensed. Lucian's hand went to the weapon she knew he carried beneath his jacket. "Don't answer it," he said, but something made Elena slide the call open anyway. Put it on speaker. Breathing on the other end, heavy, irregular. Then, "You stupid bitch!" Nolan's voice, but different now. The polished lawyer veneer completely stripped away, leaving only raw fury beneath. "You just ended both our lives. You realize that? You think the FBI is going to save you? Think DeMarco is going to protect you forever? You're nothing. You're nobody. And when I get out of this, and I will get out, I'm going to make you regret the day you were born. The line went dead. Silence crashed through the kitchen. Lucian's expression had gone absolutely lethal. He pulled out his own phone, already dialing. Marcus, run a trace on Elena's phone. Nolan just made a direct threat. I want to know where he called from. But Elena barely heard him. Her hand shook so violently the phone clattered onto the counter. The adrenaline that had carried her through the press conference drained away, leaving her hollow and terrified. Because Nolan was right about one thing. This wasn't over. And cornered animals didn't care who they took down with them. That night, Elena lay in a strange bed in a strange house, listening to footsteps in the hallway as rotating security shifted positions. Marcus had traced Nolan's call to a burner phone, untraceable and abandoned immediately after use. The FBI had been notified. Protective measures had been enhanced. None of it made Elena feel safe. She stared at the ceiling, playing Nolan's words on loop, and wondered if this was how the rest of her life would feel. Always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. A soft knock at the door made her flinch. "It's me," Lucian's voice, quiet through the wood. "Come in." He entered carefully, leaving the door cracked open behind him, maintaining propriety even in crisis. He carried 2 mugs of something that smelled like chamomile tea. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering one. Elena accepted it, let the warmth seep into her frozen hands. "Can't sleep either?" "Occupational hazard." He sat in the chair by the window, maintaining careful distance. "Plus, I keep running scenarios, ways Nolan might try to get to you, how to counter them." "There are too many variables." "I know." Lucien's jaw tightened. "But I'm going to try anyway." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking tea, listening to the house settle around them. "Thank you," Elena said finally. "For today. For all of it. I know I don't say that enough." "You don't have to." "I do." She met his eyes. "You upended your entire life for a stranger. Put yourself in the FBI's crosshairs. Let Nolan make you into a villain. Most people wouldn't do that. Most people didn't watch their mother suffer in silence until it killed her." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. "She'd be proud of you," Elena said quietly, "for what you're trying to become." Something flickered across Lucien's face. Grief, maybe. Or hope. "I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. My whole life has been violence and survival. I don't have a blueprint for normal." "Neither do I anymore." Elena set down her mug. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out together." The words carried weight. Neither of them was quite ready to name. Before Lucien could respond, an explosion of sound shattered the quiet night. Glass breaking, alarm shrieking, men shouting, gunfire. Lucien was on his feet instantly, weapon drawn, his entire demeanor transforming from gentle to lethal in a heartbeat. He moved to the window, looked out, and his face went stone cold. "We need to move. Now." Elena's heart hammered. "What's happening?" "Nolan just made his move." Lucien grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the door. "And it's worse than I thought." They burst into the hallway. Marcus appeared from the opposite direction, blood streaming from a cut on his temple, weapon raised. 4 men, he reported, voice clipped. "Professional, armed, came through the back. They're not here to talk." More gunfire erupted from downstairs. Valentina's voice shouted something Elena couldn't make out. Sarah screamed. "Basement," Lucien snapped. "Emergency exit, go." He pushed Elena toward Marcus, who grabbed her hand and ran. Behind them, Lucien provided covering fire as they descended the stairs, the sound of breaking wood and shouting men growing closer. They made it to the basement. Marcus fumbled with a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a narrow tunnel that smelled of earth and fear. "Through here," he said. "Comes out 3 houses down. Cars waiting." Elena ducked into the tunnel. Marcus followed. Above them, the sounds of the assault intensified. More gunfire. Something heavy hitting the floor, Lucien's voice shouting orders. Then silence. Terrible, suffocating silence. Elena froze. "We have to go back." Lucien still... "He can handle himself." Marcus pushed her forward. "Our job is to get you out." They emerged from the tunnel into someone's backyard. A black sedan idled at the curb, driver ready. Marcus shoved Elena into the back seat and climbed in after her. "Drive!" he barked. The car peeled away from the curb as behind them, flames began to lick from the windows of the safe house. Elena twisted in her seat, watching the fire grow, watching her temporary sanctuary burn. "Valentina," she gasped. "Sarah and Rachel. Already out," Marcus said, checking his phone. "Different exit. They're safe." "And Lucienne?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. Elena's world narrowed to a single point of terrible clarity. Nolan had just escalated from threats to attempted murder, and Lucian, the one person who truly protected her, was trapped in a burning building with professional killers. "We have to go back," she said. "We can't." "I said go back." "Elena." She grabbed the door handle, fully prepared to throw herself from a moving vehicle if that's what it took. Marcus swore viciously and pulled out his phone. "This is Marcus. We have a situation. Elena's demanding we return to the safe house. Lucien's status is—" He paused, listening. His expression shifted from grim to something approaching relief. "Copy that." He looked at Elena. "He's out, injured but mobile, heading to the secondary extraction point." "Where?" "Somewhere you're not going. Too dangerous." "I don't care about dangerous," Elena's voice cracked. "That man is hurt because of me. Because Nolan's trying to get to me. I'm not hiding while other people—" "You're exactly what you're going to do." Marcus's voice went hard. "Because if you show your face and Nolan's people grab you, everything we just fought for becomes worthless. You understand? Lucian took a bullet for you tonight. Don't make it meaningless." The words hit like a slap. Elena collapsed back against the seat, shaking with fury and fear and helplessness. "Where are you taking me?" "Airport, private jet. You're leaving Chicago." "I can't just—" "You can and you will. FBI's orders. Witness protection until they finish building their case against Nolan." The car turned onto the highway, Chicago's skyline receding in the rear window, and Elena felt her entire world splinter into pieces she didn't know how to put back together. She'd fought back. She'd told her story. She'd destroyed Nolan's reputation and started the wheels of justice turning. And in return, he'd burned down her refuge and put a bullet in the one person who'd shown her what safety felt like. This was what victory looked like, and it felt exactly like losing everything that mattered. The private jet climbed through layers of cloud until Chicago disappeared beneath a blanket of white, and Elena felt like she was being erased from her own life 1,000 feet at a time. She pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching ice crystals form at the edges of the glass, and tried to process the last 6 hours. The press conference. Nolan's threat. The attack on the safe house. Marcus forcing her into a car while Lucian, injured, bleeding, stayed behind to face professional killers hired by the man who'd spent 2 years teaching her she was worthless. The absurdity of it threatened to crack something vital inside her chest. A federal agent sat 3 rows back, ostensibly reading a magazine but clearly monitoring Elena's every movement. Her name was Torres, mid-40s, carrying herself with the exhausted competence of someone who'd seen too much and still showed up for work anyway. "Where are we going?" Elena asked for the 3rd time since takeoff. "Safe location," Torres said, still not looking up from her magazine. "You'll be briefed when we land." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to demand actual information, but exhaustion had sunk into her bones like lead, making even the effort of anger feel impossible. She pulled out her phone, the one Valentina had given her, now with several missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize, and one text message that made her breath catch. From Marcus. "He's stable. Bullet grazed his shoulder. Pissed as hell you left, but understands why. Stay safe. We'll find you when it's over." Elena read the message 17 times, trying to extract meaning from the spaces between words. Stable meant alive, pissed meant conscious. But when it's over was the part that hollowed her out, because she had no idea when that would be or what would be left of any of them by the time it happened. The plane landed 3 hours later at a small airfield Elena didn't recognize. No signs, no visible markers of location, just tarmac and hangar, and the kind of anonymous infrastructure that existed solely to move people who didn't want to be found. Torres guided her to a waiting SUV, black, tinted windows, the standard vehicle of people conducting business that couldn't survive sunlight. They drove for another hour through landscape that gradually shifted from flat agricultural nothing to rolling hills thick with pine forest. Finally, they turned down a gravel road that wound through trees so dense they blocked out the late afternoon sun. The road ended at a cabin that managed to be both rustic and clearly expensive, the kind of place wealthy people bought when they wanted to pretend they were roughing it. "This is home for the foreseeable future," Torres said, killing the engine. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, satellite internet. No cell service, but there's a landline that goes directly to our field office. Use it if you need anything. "Or if someone tries to kill me again?" Elena's voice came out flat. "That too." Torres didn't smile. "You'll have rotating agents on the property. They'll stay out of sight unless there's a problem. Try to relax, read, sleep. The FBI's building their case. Should be a few weeks, maybe a month." "And then what?" "Then Nolan Pierce gets indicted and you testify, and hopefully he spends the next decade in federal prison." Torres pulled a folder from her bag, handed it over. "Your new identity documents. Memorize them. Burn them when you're done." Elena opened the folder. A driver's license stared back at her with her own face but a stranger's name. Sarah Mitchell. Address in Portland, Oregon. Born June 12, 1995, making her a year younger than she actually was. "I'm not keeping this," she said. "You are, until the trial's over and Nolan's behind bars." Torres's voice softened fractionally. "I know this is hard, but you did the right thing coming forward. Most women don't get this far. Most women don't have a criminal empire backing them up. No, they don't. Consider yourself lucky." Lucky. Elena almost laughed. Instead, she climbed out of the SUV and walked toward the cabin that would be her prison for the next month, carrying a folder that said she was someone else entirely. The first week passed in a fog of isolation that felt like drowning in slow motion. Elena woke when sunlight filtered through the pines, made coffee in a kitchen stocked by people she'd never meet, tried to read books from the shelf someone had carefully curated, mysteries, thrillers, nothing that required emotional investment. Failed. Stared at walls, counted the number of trees visible from the living room window until the numbers lost meaning. The landline rang exactly once per day at 8 p.m. Always Torres, checking in with professional detachment, updating Elena on the investigation's progress in careful language that revealed nothing. "The evidence is solid," Torres said on day 4. "Nolan's attorneys are pushing for a plea deal." "Will he take it?" "Doubtful. Men like him don't admit guilt. They fight until the system breaks them." "And if the system doesn't break him?" Silence on the other end. "Then, we're building a case that can't fail. Trust the process." Elena hung up and laughed until she cried, because trusting the process was what had gotten her 2 years with Nolan in the first place. On day 8, she woke to find an envelope had been slipped under the front door sometime during the night. No postmark. No return address. Just her real name written in handwriting she didn't recognize. Inside, a single photograph. Lucien, standing outside what looked like a hospital, his left arm in a sling, talking to someone out of frame. The angle suggested it had been taken with a telephoto lens from a considerable distance. On the back, 3 words in the same unfamiliar handwriting. "He's looking for you." Elena's hand shook so hard the photo fluttered to the floor. She grabbed the landline, dialed Torres's direct number. "Someone left something at the cabin, a photograph. They know where I am." "Describe it." Elena did. Heard Torres typing rapidly on the other end. "We're sending a team to sweep the property. Don't open the door for anyone except federal agents with proper ID. Understand?" "How did they find me?" "We're working on that." Torres paused. "The photo, it's recent?" "Yes. Maybe a few days old based on..." Elena stopped, picked up the photograph again. In the background, partially visible, a newspaper stand with a date on the visible paper, yesterday's date. "He was in Chicago yesterday," she said, "which means he's not here. Whoever left this isn't Lucien." "Then who?" Elena's blood went cold. "Nolan. Or someone working for him, letting me know he can find me whenever he wants." Torres swore quietly. "Pack a bag. We're moving you." "To where?" "Somewhere better. That's what you said about this place." "Elena." "No." The word came out harder than Elena intended. I'm done running. You said the evidence is solid, so arrest him, charge him, end this. It's not that simple. Make it that simple. Elena's voice cracked. I did everything you asked. I testified. I gave you documentation. I put Sarah and Rachel through hell reliving their trauma. And for what? So Nolan can play cat and mouse while I hide in the woods pretending to be someone else? The grand jury convenes in 3 days, Torres said quietly. We're confident they'll indict. After that, he'll be arrested and held pending trial. No bail. Too much flight risk. 3 days. Elena sank onto the couch. Can you keep me alive for 3 days? Yes. The certainty in that single word should have been comforting. Elena had stopped believing in certainties. She hung up, looked at the photograph of Lucien again, studied his face, the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself despite the injury. He looked tired, furious, determined. He's looking for you. The knowledge settled into Elena's chest like an anchor. She didn't know if that made her feel safer or more terrified. The sweep team arrived within 2 hours, 4 agents, tactical gear, the kind of serious hardware that suggested they were preparing for actual combat. They found nothing. No cameras, no tracking devices, no evidence of how the photograph had been delivered beyond boot prints near the door that led nowhere. Probably a drop, one agent said. Someone paid to deliver without knowing the contents or recipient. We'll canvass local towns, see if anyone remembers. You won't find them, Elena said. Nolan's too smart for that. The agent looked like he wanted to argue. Didn't. The team left after dark, replaced by 2 new agents who took up positions in the woods with night vision equipment and enough firepower to repel a small army. Elena tried to sleep. Failed. Got up at 3 a.m. and made coffee she didn't want, standing at the kitchen window watching shadows move between trees, trying to determine which ones were federal agents and which ones were her paranoia given form. Her phone buzzed. The secure one Marcus had given her, which shouldn't have signal out here, which meant the text was from a blocked number. You can't hide forever. And when I find you, we're going to have a very long conversation about consequences. N. Elena's coffee mug hit the floor, ceramic shattering into a dozen pieces that scattered across hardwood like shrapnel. She was dialing Torres before conscious thought caught up. He just texted me. Nolan. On a phone that's supposed to be secure. That's impossible. Read it to you word for word. Ikiki. Don't. We're compromised. Burn the phone. I'm sending an extraction team. 20 minutes. Pack only essentials. The line went dead. Elena stood in her kitchen surrounded by broken ceramic and the wreckage of the illusion of safety, and something fundamental shifted inside her chest. She was done being protected, done being moved like a chess piece, done letting other people fight her battles while she hid in increasingly smaller boxes. Nolan wanted a conversation about consequences? Fine. They'd have one, but on her terms this time. Elena didn't pack essentials. She dressed in the darkest clothes she could find, jeans, black sweater, boots meant for hiking. She pocketed the photograph of Lucien and the burner phone Nolan had somehow compromised. Then she walked out the front door into the 3 a.m. darkness and started moving through the forest in the opposite direction of where the extraction team would arrive. She made it maybe half a mile before a hand closed around her arm and spun her against a tree trunk hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Lucien's face materialized from the shadows, furious and beautiful and alive. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was barely above a whisper, rough with pain and exertion. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. How did you find me? Followed the FBI's surveillance team. They're not as subtle as they think. His hand was still on her arm, grip firm but not painful. Now answer the question. Where are you going? Away. Somewhere Nolan can't use me as leverage against you or the FBI or anyone else. That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard. It's my plan. My choice. Elena tried to pull free. His hand tightened fractionally. Let go. No. They stared at each other in the darkness, breath fogging in the October cold, and Elena could see the battle playing across Lucien's face. The instinct to protect warring with the understanding that she needed to be allowed to make her own mistakes. He texted me, she said finally. Nolan, on a supposedly secure phone, which means he's got resources inside law enforcement or inside your organization, or both. Nowhere is safe. So I'd rather be moving than waiting for him to make his next move. So you're just going to walk into the woods alone? With no weapon, no plan, no idea where you're even going? Better than being bait in a trap I didn't set. Lucian's jaw worked. You're right that we're compromised. Torres called me 30 seconds ago. Someone inside the FBI has been feeding Nolan information. They're working on identification, but in the meantime, I'm exposed and you're injured and this entire thing is falling apart. Yes. The honesty of it stole Elena's breath. She sagged against the tree, exhaustion and fear finally winning the war against adrenaline. What do we do? She whispered. Lucian was quiet for a long moment, his hand still on her arm, grounding her. We end it, tonight, before Nolan has time to regroup. How? You trust me? The question hung between them, weighted with everything that had happened since the night he'd offered his hand across a restaurant table. Elena looked at him, this dangerous man who'd upended his life to give her a choice, who'd taken a bullet meant for her, who'd tracked her through miles of forest despite an injury that had to be screaming agony. Yes, she said, I trust you. Lucien's expression softened fractionally, then hardened back into tactical precision. Good, because we're about to do something either brilliant or catastrophically stupid, and I haven't decided which yet. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Marcus, change of plans, bring everything to the secondary location. Yeah, her too. 30 minutes. He hung up, looked at Elena. Can you run? Do I have a choice? Not really. They ran, through forest that tore at exposed skin, over ground treacherous with roots and rocks, moving fast enough that Elena's lungs burned and her legs screamed protest. Behind them, voices called out. The FBI extraction team, probably, wondering where their witness had gone. They didn't stop to explain. 20 minutes later, they emerged from the tree line onto a small county road where Marcus waited with the black SUV, engine running. Valentina sat in the passenger seat, laptop open, her face illuminated by screen glow. This is insane, she said when they climbed in. Agreed. Lucien slammed the door. Drive. Marcus pulled away from the shoulder, tires spitting gravel. Where are we going? Chicago. Everyone in the vehicle went silent. That's suicide, Marcus said finally. Nolan's got the entire city wired. FBI's looking for Elena. You've got an active arrest warrant, which is exactly why he won't expect it. Lucian's voice was ice and certainty. He thinks Elena's in protective custody, thinks I'm lying low waiting for the indictment. We hit him tonight while he's still celebrating what he thinks is a win. Hit him how? Elena demanded. Walk up and politely ask him to confess? Something like that. Lucien met her eyes in the rearview mirror. You said you wanted this on your terms. I'm giving you that chance. But you need to understand, this ends badly for someone tonight. Maybe Nolan. Maybe us. Maybe both. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. What do you need me to do? Make a phone call. 40 minutes later, Elena stood in a parking garage 3 blocks from Nolan's downtown apartment, phone in shaking hands, about to do the most reckless thing she'd ever attempted. Valentina had set up recording equipment. Marcus had positioned himself with line of sight to the building's entrance. Lucien stood beside Elena, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the coiled tension in his frame. You sure about this? He asked quietly. Elena thought about the last 2 years. Thought about Nolan's hands around her throat, his voice in her ear promising punishment, his ability to make her feel small and worthless and deserving of every cruelty. She thought about the woman she'd been before him and the woman she was becoming despite him. Make the call, she said. Valentina handed over a phone, another burner, impossible to trace. Elena dialed Nolan's number from memory. It rang 3 times. Who is this? Nolan's voice, sharp with suspicion. It's me. Silence. Then, Elena. Her name in his mouth sounded like a curse and a prayer simultaneously. Where are you? Somewhere you can't reach me, but I wanted to call, to tell you that you were right. Right about what? Everything. Elena forced the words out, made them sound broken and defeated. The FBI. Lucien. All of it. They used me, made me say things about you that weren't true, and now they're done with me and I have nowhere left to go. The silence on the other end vibrated with calculation. Nolan trying to determine if this was a trap. "You sound tired, baby," he said finally, his voice shifting into that terrible, gentle register he used before violence. "Where are you? Let me come get you. Bring you home." "I can't go back to the apartment. FBI is watching it." "Then somewhere else. Name the place." Elena's eyes met Lucian's. He nodded once. "The Riverwalk, near the Michigan Avenue Bridge. 1 hour. Just you. No lawyers, no security, nobody." "Elena, those are my terms. You want to see me, you come alone. Otherwise I disappear and you never find me." Another pause. Nolan processing, strategizing, deciding whether the risk was worth the reward. 1 hour, he said finally. "I'll be there." The line went dead. Elena's legs nearly gave out. Lucien caught her elbow, steadied her. "Phase 1 complete," Valentina said, already packing up equipment. "Now comes the hard part." The Chicago River Walk at 11 p.m. was exactly as deserted as they'd hoped. Streetlights cast pools of amber across concrete. Water lapped against stone embankments. In the distance, traffic sounds provided white noise cover. Elena stood at the railing overlooking the river, wearing the same navy dress from the night Lucien had rescued her. Valentina had pulled it from evidence storage somehow, and Elena had forced herself to put it on despite every instinct screaming in protest. The symbolism mattered, showing Nolan she was the same broken woman he'd controlled for 2 years. Except she wasn't, and the wire taped to her ribs beneath the dress fabric was going to prove it. Marcus and 2 other security personnel were positioned at strategic points around the area, close enough to intervene if things went wrong, far enough to maintain the illusion Elena was alone. Lucien had wanted to be one of them, but Valentina had overruled him, pointing out that Nolan would recognize him instantly and the entire operation would collapse. So instead, Lucien was blocks away in the SU-5, listening through the wire, probably going out of his mind with the enforced distance. Elena heard footsteps approaching, made herself not turn around, not tense visibly, just stood at the railing like someone defeated and desperate. "Hello, Elena." Nolan's voice slid across her skin like oil. She turned slowly. He looked immaculate as always, tailored coat, perfect hair, the kind of handsome that belonged in magazine spreads. But up close, she could see the cracks, dark circles beneath his eyes, a tightness around his mouth. The investigation was taking its toll. "Good. You came," she said, making her voice small. "Of course I came." Nolan moved closer and Elena had to force herself not to retreat. "I've been losing my mind worrying about you. Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" "The FBI, no. They were professional." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "But Lucien!" "What about him?" Nolan's voice hardened. "He scared me. All of them did. The guns, the security, the constant watching. I thought they were helping, but it felt like just another prison." Nolan's expression shifted into something that might have passed for concern if you didn't know him. "Baby, I tried to tell you, men like DeMarco don't help people. They use them. I know that now. So why the press conference? Why tell all those lies about me?" Elena flinched at the word lies, forced herself to stay in character. "They coached me. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd charge me as an accessory to your supposed crimes. I was scared. I said what they told me to say." Nolan studied her with predator's eyes, searching for deception. "And the other women? Sarah and Rachel?" "I don't know. Maybe they had similar deals. Maybe they actually believe what they're saying." Elena's voice cracked. "I just know I can't keep living like this. Running, hiding. I want my life back." "What life, Elena?" Nolan's tone shifted, showing teeth beneath the concern. "You destroyed your reputation. Your job is gone. Your friends think you're either a liar or a victim of Stockholm Syndrome. What exactly are you coming back to?" The cruelty beneath the question was familiar, comfortable. This was the Nolan she knew. "I'm coming back to you," Elena whispered. "If you'll have me. If you can forgive me for—" "Forgive you?" Nolan laughed, sharp and cold. "You humiliated me, destroyed my career. My father won't even take my calls anymore. The FBI is building a federal case based on lies you told, and you want forgiveness?" Elena took a step back. Nolan matched it forward. "You want to know what I want, Elena? I want you to understand what you've done, the consequences of your choices. His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist in the old familiar grip. And then I want you to help me fix it. Fix it how? You're going to recant every statement, every accusation. You're going to tell the FBI you lied. That DeMarco and his people coerced you into making false allegations. You're going to destroy his credibility the way you tried to destroy mine. Elena's heart hammered. And if I do that, then maybe I'll consider taking you back. After appropriate punishment, of course. His grip tightened until bones ground together. Can't let you think there are no consequences, baby. That wouldn't be healthy for either of us. There it was. The threat dressed up as concern. The promise of violence wrapped in the language of love. Elena looked at the man who'd spent 2 years systematically destroying her sense of self-worth and felt something crystallize inside her chest. Not fear. Not anymore. Rage. You're right, she said quietly. There should be consequences. She triggered the panic button sewn into her dress sleeve. Marcus and his team materialized from the shadows, weapons drawn. Nolan's hand released her wrist instantly as he spun to face the new threat, his expression shifting from possessive to calculating in a heartbeat. What is this? He demanded. This is you confessing to coercion on a federal wiretap. Elena pulled the wire from beneath her dress, held it up so he could see. Every word recorded, every threat documented. No more he said, she said. Just you, telling me exactly what kind of monster you are. Nolan's face went white, then red. You bitch? I'm the bitch who's ending you. Elena's voice didn't shake. Federal agents are pulling up right now. You're under arrest, and this time, your father's connections can't save you. As if on cue, 3 black SUVs converged on the Riverwalk, FBI logos visible in the streetlight. Torres stepped out of the lead vehicle, badge raised. Nolan Pierce, you're under arrest for making terroristic threats, witness intimidation, and violation of federal wiretap laws. You have the right to remain silent. The words faded into background noise as agents swarmed Nolan, forcing him to his knees, securing his wrists in handcuffs. He fought the entire time, screaming about lawyers and rights, and his father's position, sounding exactly like what he was. A spoiled predator who'd finally run out of places to hide. Elena watched it happen and felt nothing. No triumph, no relief. Just exhaustion and the faint echo of 2 years of her life she'd never get back. Torres approached, professional mask firmly in place. We got it all. The threats, the admission of prior abuse, the attempted coercion. Combined with your previous testimony and the evidence from Sarah and Rachel, he's looking at 10 to 15 years minimum. What about the mole? The person feeding him information? In custody as of 20 minutes ago. Junior analyst with gambling debts. Nolan was paying him to track your location. Torres's expression softened fractionally. It's over, Ms. Vale. Actually over this time. Elena nodded numbly, watched as they loaded Nolan into an SUV, his face visible through the window, contorted with rage and disbelief. Their eyes met for one last moment, and Elena smiled. Not a big smile, not triumphant or cruel, just a small, private acknowledgement that she had survived him, that she was standing upright while he was in handcuffs, that for the first time in 2 years she was the one with power. Nolan's expression crumbled. The rage collapsed into something that might have been genuine despair if you were generous enough to care. Elena turned away. Didn't watch the SUV pull out. Didn't need to. She was done watching Nolan Pierce take up space in her life. Marcus appeared at her elbow. Lucian's waiting in the car. Wants to see you. Elena let him guide her toward the black SUV, idling at the edge of the scene. The rear door opened and Lucien sat inside, arms still in a sling, his face drawn with pain and relief in equal measure. You did it, he said. We did it. Elena climbed in beside him. All of us. Valentina twisted from the front seat. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever watched. Haven't decided which. Can it be both? Elena's laugh came out slightly hysterical. They drove away from the Riverwalk, from the flashing lights and federal agents and the ending of one chapter. The city slid past the windows in familiar patterns. Buildings she'd known her whole life, suddenly looking different now that she could see them without fear coloring every shadow. What happens now? She asked. Now you figure out what you want, Lucien said. No more running, no more hiding, just living. The concept felt foreign, impossible. Elena had spent so long in survival mode, she'd forgotten what actual living looked like. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "Then learn." Valentina's voice was surprisingly gentle. "You've got time, and people who'll help if you want them to." Elena looked at these people, this strange, dangerous family who'd taken her in when she had nothing, who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, who'd given her the space to become someone strong enough to face her demons. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Thank us by building something worth protecting," Lucian said. "That's all the payment I need." 6 months later, Elena stood in front of a classroom of second graders at Lincoln Elementary, reading from a picture book about a girl who learned to be brave. It was the first day of spring. Sunlight streamed through windows, illuminating 22 small faces watching her with the kind of attention only children could manage. Emma sat in the front row, gap-toothed smile wide, completely unaware that she'd once been used as a threat by a monster who no longer existed in Elena's daily reality. The trial had lasted 3 weeks. Nolan's attorneys had tried every manipulation tactic in the book, painted Elena as mentally unstable, suggested she and Lucian had conspired to frame an innocent man, produced character witnesses who swore Nolan was a pillar of the community. The jury had deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. 12 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. Judge Lawrence Pierce had recused himself from anything involving the case, his reputation permanently tarnished by his son's conviction. Officer Brennan had taken a plea deal, singing like a canary about the entire corrupt network in exchange for a reduced sentence. And Elena had stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by Sarah and Rachel and a crowd of reporters, and made a statement about the long road to justice and the importance of believing survivors. She'd meant every word. But privately, in the quiet moments alone, Elena understood that justice was just the first step. Healing was the marathon that came after. She'd started therapy, real therapy, with a trauma specialist who understood intimate partner violence and didn't try to fix her in 6 easy sessions. The work was brutal. Some days Elena felt like she was being torn apart and reassembled into a stranger. But slowly, painfully, she was becoming someone she recognized. Someone who could sleep through the night without nightmares. Someone who didn't flinch when people touched her unexpectedly. Someone who could make decisions about what she wanted without second-guessing whether she deserved to want anything at all. The bell rang, signaling recess. 22 children exploded from their seats with the kind of controlled chaos Elena had learned to navigate. "Miss Vale?" Emma appeared at her desk, clutching a drawing. "I made you something." The picture showed 2 stick figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. "That's you," Emma pointed to the taller figure. "Being brave, like the girl in the story." Elena's throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful." Emma beamed and ran off to join her friends on the playground. Elena pinned the drawing to her bulletin board, adding it to the collection of art and encouragement cards and small tokens that made up her classroom's ecosystem. This was her world now. Simple, grounded, real. Her phone buzzed. A text from Valentina. "Lunch this weekend? Want to hear about the foundation plans?" Elena smiled. The foundation had been Valentina's idea, an organization providing resources and legal support for domestic violence survivors trying to rebuild their lives. Elena had signed on as a board member, using her story to help fundraise and advocate for systemic change. It felt good, purposeful, like taking the worst thing that had ever happened to her and transforming it into something that might prevent it from happening to someone else. She texted back, "Says Saturday works. Usual place?" "Perfect." Lucien says hi. Elena's smile widened. Lucien. That was complicated. They'd tried dating after the trial ended. Dinner, movies, normal couple things. But the foundation of their relationship was trauma and rescue, and trying to build romance on top of that had felt forced, performative. So they'd stopped, remained friends. Lucien focused on legitimizing his business empire. Elena focused on healing, and they orbited each other like planets that had shared gravity but needed separate trajectories. Some nights Elena wondered if they'd ever try again, if enough time and healing could transform what they had into something sustainable. Other nights she recognized that not every connection was meant to be romantic, that Lucien had given her exactly what she needed, the space to save herself, and that was more valuable than any relationship. The afternoon passed in the familiar rhythm of elementary education. Math lessons, reading groups, a minor crisis involving spilled paint that was resolved with paper towels, and patience. When the final bell rang and the last student was collected by a parent, Elena packed up her classroom and stepped out into the parking lot. Spring in Chicago was unpredictable. Cold one day, warm the next, the city oscillating between winter and summer without much transition. Today was warm, the kind of afternoon that made people remember why they lived somewhere with actual seasons. Elena drove to her apartment, a one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with a doorman who knew her name and neighbors who smiled in elevators. She'd signed the lease herself, furnished it herself, paid rent from her own bank account that Nolan had never touched. Small victories. But they mattered. She made dinner, pasta with vegetables, nothing fancy, just fuel. Ate while reading a book that had nothing to do with trauma or recovery or domestic violence. A thriller about art thieves. Escapism at its finest. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Elena's heart rate spiked before logic caught up. Nolan was in prison. Couldn't call. The unknown numbers were just spam now, not threats. She let it go to voicemail. Later, she'd check it and find a recording about her car's extended warranty and laugh at how mundane dangers had become. As the sun set over Chicago, painting her apartment walls in shades of gold and amber, Elena stood at her window and looked out at the city she'd almost left. The city that had witnessed her destruction and her resurrection. She thought about the woman who'd sat across from Nolan at Bella Rosa, too terrified to ask permission to use the bathroom. She thought about the woman who'd taken a stranger's hand and trusted that anything was better than what she was living. She thought about the woman who'd stood in front of news cameras and reclaimed her story. And she thought about the woman she was becoming, scarred but standing, broken but healing, forever changed but not forever broken. The road ahead was long. Some days would be harder than others. Trauma didn't heal on a convenient timeline, and Elena knew she'd be processing what Nolan had done for years to come. But she had survived. More than survived. She had fought back and won. And that was enough. For tonight, standing in her own apartment, living a life she'd built from ruins, it was more than enough. Elena pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts until she found Sarah's number. "Hey," she said when Sarah answered. "Want to grab coffee this week? Just talk?" "I'd love that." Sarah's voice carried the same careful optimism Elena felt. "Tuesday work?" "Tuesday's perfect." They hung up with plans to meet at a cafe neither of them had been to before. Neutral ground, a place with no memories attached. Elena returned to her window, watched the city lights flicker to life against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Lucian was probably working late, determined to prove his empire could exist without bloodshed. Somewhere out there, Valentina was building something that would help women like Elena find their way out of darkness. Somewhere out there, Marcus was keeping people safe because that's what he did. And somewhere out there, locked in a federal prison cell, Nolan Pierce was learning that consequences were real and justice, while slow, could still arrive. Elena didn't think about him much anymore. He'd taken enough of her life. She was done giving him space in her head rent-free. She closed the curtains, made herself tea, settled onto her couch with her book and her cat, a rescue she'd adopted 2 months ago, a gray tabby named Phoenix because the symbolism had been too perfect to resist. Phoenix purred in her lap. The tea warmed her hands. The thriller reached a climactic moment. And Elena Vale, survivor, teacher, advocate, imperfect human doing her best with what she'd been given, allowed herself a moment of simple, ordinary peace. It wouldn't last forever. Life was too complicated for that. But for tonight, in this apartment, with this cat and this book and this hard-won freedom, it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Edith. 1 year after the trial, Elena stood on a stage at a conference for domestic violence advocates, microphone in hand, looking out at 200 faces waiting to hear her story. She'd gotten better at public speaking. The first few times had been terrifying. Voice shaking, hands trembling, convinced she'd break down mid-sentence. But repetition had built something like confidence, not comfort. She'd never be comfortable talking about what Nolan had done, but she was willing. because her discomfort was a small price to pay if it meant helping someone else recognize the patterns earlier than she had. "My name is Elena Vale," she began, "and I'm going to tell you about the worst and best thing that ever happened to me." She told them about Nolan, about the isolation and control and violence. She told them about Lucien, about the stranger who'd offered a hand when she'd forgotten hands could be gentle. She told them about a legal system, its failures and occasional successes, the exhausting marathon of seeking justice through institutions that weren't built to protect people like her. And she told them about healing, about therapy and setbacks, and the slow, unglamorous work of rebuilding a self that had been systematically dismantled. "I'm not going to tell you it gets easier," she said, "because some days it doesn't. Some days I still wake up checking my phone for threatening messages that aren't coming anymore. Some days I still flinch at raised voices. Some days I still wonder if I deserved what happened." She paused. "Let the honesty land. But those days are getting fewer. And in between them, I have days where I laugh without guilt, where I make choices without terror, where I exist as a full human being instead of a collection of fears and survival mechanisms. That's the thing they don't tell you about leaving abuse," Elena continued. "You think the hard part is escaping, and it is hard. Don't misunderstand. Getting out is brutally, impossibly hard. But staying out, building a life after, that's the real work. That's the part that takes everything you have." She saw heads nodding in the audience. Survivors who understood, advocates who'd watched this process 1,000 times. If you're currently in an abusive relationship, please hear this. It's not your fault. You didn't cause it. You can't fix it, and you deserve better. I know you don't believe that yet. I didn't either, but I'm standing here today as proof that escape is possible. Justice is possible. Healing is possible. Her voice caught slightly. She pushed through. And if you're supporting a survivor, please understand that we need patience more than advice. We need you to believe us more than you need to fix us. We need space to make our own choices, even when those choices don't make sense to you. Elena scanned the crowd, found familiar faces. Sarah and Rachel sitting in the third row. Valentina standing near the back. Marcus, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable in a room full of emotions but present anyway. And Lucien, half hidden in shadows near the exit, his eyes locked on hers with something that looked like pride. "The stranger who helped me escape did something I'll never forget," Elena said. "He asked what I wanted, not what he thought I needed, not what made sense to him, what I wanted." That question changed everything. Because for 2 years, no one had asked. For 2 years, my wants hadn't mattered. And suddenly, there was someone treating my agency like it was sacred, like I was worth listening to. She took a breath. Let the weight of that settle. So if you're helping someone escape abuse, start there. Ask what they want. Listen to the answer, and then give them the resources to make it happen. Don't rescue them. Empower them to rescue themselves. The speech ended to sustained applause. Elena stepped off the stage on shaking legs, immediately surrounded by people wanting to share their own stories, ask questions, request resources. She handled each conversation with the careful attention it deserved. These moments mattered. Every connection was a thread in a network that could save lives. An hour later, the crowd had dispersed. Elena found herself in an empty conference room, collecting her notes, coming down from the adrenaline high of public speaking. Lucien appeared in the doorway. "That was powerful," he said simply. "It was necessary." Elena zipped her bag. "How's the business transformation going?" "Slowly. Turns out legitimizing a criminal empire is complicated." His smile was wry. "But we're making progress. 6 months without a single violent incident. That's a record for us." "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of you too. What you're doing with the foundation, the advocacy work, my mother would have loved it." The mention of his mother hung between them, heavy with shared understanding of what trauma could do to people and what breaking that cycle required. "You want to grab dinner?" Lucien asked. "No agenda. Just 2 friends catching up." Elena considered, felt no anxiety at the prospect, no obligation, just the simple pleasure of spending time with someone who understood her in ways most people couldn't. "Yeah," she said, "I'd like that." They walked out of the conference center together, into the Chicago evening, and Elena realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this grounded, this present, this fully herself. The work wasn't done. probably would never be completely done. Healing wasn't a destination, but a practice, something you chose again and again. But she was choosing it every day. Every small decision to believe she deserved safety and peace and a life built on her own terms. That was enough. That was everything. And as the city lights flickered to life around them, and Lucien made her laugh with some story about Valentina terrorizing his legal team, Elena allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of someone waiting to be rescued. The solid, earned hope of someone who'd rescued herself and knew she could do it again if she had to. She'd survived the worst thing she could imagine. And she'd done more than survive. She'd transformed it into purpose, into connection, into a life worth fighting for. The scars would always be there. The memories would never fully fade. But they didn't define her anymore. She defined herself. And that made all the difference.